All right,
Can't
we're
just
live.
see it on my face.
Yeah, you can. You see it's like a big smile. Look at that. Like right when you smiled, it went live. Look at that. So
Of course.
welcome everyone. Welcome to episode 76. You'll be the third person now that we started doing bios or chat GPT bios adjusted by me, which is great. So we'll start off. I think we're ready to go. Look, I still think we're still here. I don't know what happened there. I love these technical glitches we were just talking about before. A great producer would have fixed this. We have our challenges here. So if anybody wants to give free technical support, we'll pay you in bourbon or whiskey. So, but before we get to that, before we interrupt it, we're going to introduce our guest for episode 76, Colonel Retired Adam Boyd. Tonight's guest, like I said, is Colonel Retired Adam Boyd, a 36-year Army veteran whose career took him from the streets of Bedford, Mass. to some of the most critical intelligence and leadership roles in the U.S. military. He enlisted in 1987 as a linguist, was commissioned with the United States Military Academy in 1994, and went on to lead soldiers across the globe, including combat tours in Iraq and Afghanistan, battalion command at Fort Huachuca, and a pivotal role as garrison commander in Bavaria. Colonel Boyd is not only a decorated officer, but also a lifetime martial artist. He began training in judo in the late 1970s, is deeply rooted in Brazilian jiu-jitsu, and even co-owned an MMA gym during his time in Arizona. His passion for combat sports reflects the discipline, resilience, and humility he's carried through every chapter of his life. Now retired, Colonel Boyd is starting in New Jersey, studying violin making, which I can't wait to talk about, and repair at the North Bennett Street School in Boston. He's also navigating life after a devastating loss of his wife, Kristen, who passed away from cancer December 2024. His two children, Olivia and Colin, continue the family legacy of service as active duty Army officers. Today, we dive into resilience, identity, healing through craft and combat, and the quiet strength it takes to begin again. So welcome, Adam. Glad to have you in.
Well, thanks for having me, Chad.
And I think you're the only person that's flown in.
So far.
Yeah. We have our next three guests will be coming out of town, so you're the first one to start it. So I really appreciate that. Just for the guests, know he left Boston, not my favorite city this morning. Was picked up in Cleveland, not another favorite city, but
I landed in the right spot.
Right. You're in Columbus. You're good, and your accompanied by your chauffeur is actually even an interesting story. I wish we could get him on. We'll have to, knowing that he's this close, we'll have to have him come in. But he was actually one of my freshmen at Norwich. I haven't seen him probably. I saw your brag. We said that, yeah. But we'll just say it was 31 years ago that I was such a nice, kind upperclassman who did not haze you because we're on camera. But I often think about how the awful things we did back then, but it is what it is. So we'll start off the quote before we get into your story. So this is a quote from John Berger. Being a unique superpower undermines the military intelligence of strategy. To think strategically, one has to imagine oneself in the enemy's place. If one cannot do this, it is impossible to foresee, to take by surprise, to outflank. Misinterpreting enemy can lead to defeat. This is how empires fail. So we'll talk about more as military intelligence created. Did that for a little bit.
Yep.
A few years.
Just a couple.
So let's start off about growing off. You're a Massachusetts guy. I mean, I got a lot of Massachusetts jokes, but you did flying, so I'm going to kind of keep them low today. So
no, that's fine.
Grew up in Bedford, I'd say. You moved from,
so actually I lived more in Lynn. I grew up so Lynn, the only reason I want to bring up Lynn, obviously, so it's a city about 10 miles north of Boston.
I knew that was coming. Anybody that knows that everything is gauged about how far it is from Boston. So.
Yeah, of course. Yep. So I never lived more than a half hour outside of Boston before I enlisted. So you wouldn't necessarily know it from the accent. Perhaps it'll come out, but
the more you drink.
More TV as a child, so less accent. So Lynn is famous for being a little more rough and tumble of a city. Has its own poem, right? Lynn, city of sin, never go out the way you come in. But I was there all the way through junior high, and then moved to Bedford. So Bedford, a little more upscale suburbs, northwest, about 18 miles northwest of Boston. Hanscom Air Force Base is right there in Bedford. So I went to high school with all the Air Force kids, and then did, of course, Air Force Junior RTC. So I rose through the ranks of Air Force Junior RTC as well, and they were a little taken aback when I enlisted in the Army.
Yeah, we're like, I'm not doing this.
Well, again, we like the Army Air Corps. They are a good child.
That's true.
We look at the Space Force. That is our grandchild. So we're waiting to see. It does skip a generation, right? So
the Space Force. That's still the elusive guest that we haven't had yet as a Space Force.
Yeah, I'm sure it's coming.
I'm
sure it's coming.
There's not many of them though.
No. In fact, right, because a lot of folk have had to switch from their original branch. I mean, they don't have a lot of homegrown as of yet. But yeah, so growing up in Massachusetts, so it's funny that I am the 76th guest here because I think of 76 as being the bicentennial, right? Okay. So being in Massachusetts in the bicentennial, I actually was in a Pepsi commercial for the bicentennial.
Did you have it? Have you been able to find it?
My father, no. Yeah, and I challenge anyone to try to find it online. So my father was a Lexington Minuteman.
Cool.
Pepsi had got all the Lexington Minutemen, so all the little kids were like, we were riding our bikes behind them, and having picnics and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, it's rather apropos being from Massachusetts that I would be guest number 76.
And I think it's funny, like everybody's like, some people like Josh is like, what is the bicentennial? He doesn't. He's like,
this is the 250th. Come on, we're getting ready to come up on the 250th birthday of our country.
I know, isn't that crazy?
Right? So they, in fact, just this last April, here I'll give you another little hometown trivia. So Bedford, Massachusetts, has a big, huge claim to fame. Its town flag is flying in the West Point mess hall.
Oh wow! Why is that?
So in the poet Ralph Waldo Emerson.
Okay.
He had that little stanza of one of his poems. By the rude bridge that arched the flood, their flag to April's breeze unfurled, where once embattled farmers stood and fired the shot heard around the world. So he coined the phrase "shot heard around the world." So he's talking in April, of course. That was April 1775, so 250th this year, right, of the Battle of Lexington Green, where we chased the British all the way back to Boston through Concord. So the bridge they're talking about is the Old North Bridge in Concord, but the flag he's talking about is the Bedford flag. So it was the first flag carried by the Continental Army fighting against the British. So it's considered the first battle flag of the United States Army. I
didn't know that. That's a great.
Yeah.
That's what I love about this. You learn something that you never learned before. I didn't know that. I just kind of shit on Massachusetts a lot, just because I think of sports teams and
yeah, but without Massachusetts, we wouldn't have this country.
That's true. No, I know. I just love giving them a hard time because going to Norwich, like 80% of the people are from Massachusetts, and then like being a New Yorker, like it's just a state you hate, I guess. You know what I mean? We just grow to hate it. And then my brother-in-law lives there, and I always made a joke that I'd never
visit.
We'd visit, but I would never move to Mass. I'd be like, no way, no. But I almost did that when I got out of the Army. Went up there for a steel mill. It was an interesting job. And I was like, God, thank God I didn't get that, because I'd have been in Massachusetts, of course.
Well, actually, there's a lot of trade still in Massachusetts too, and we'll talk about that in a little bit.
Yeah. So growing up, did a lot of different things.
Yep. Eagle Scout,
marching band, Army.
Oh yeah, marching
Air
band,
Force, ROTC.
Oh, yeah.
Any brothers and sisters?
Yep. So younger brother who also did a stint at one enlistment in the Army as an artilleryman, and two younger sisters. Now. Okay, so here's another. You didn't see it in my bio, but I will share it with you. So I also in high school was a professional clown. So my sisters are 9 and 12 years younger than I, and I never wanted to work in any sort of fast food or any of that kind of stuff. But I learned to juggle. I did some magic, learned to ride a unicycle and things like that. One of my sisters had a birthday party when she was little. I was like, you know what? I'll do the birthday party. Got gussied up as a clown, entertained. And one thing led to another, and one of the mothers asked mine, "Hey, where'd you get that clown?" And she had to respond, "Well, that was no clown. That was my son." Yeah. And that started a business for me.
So, what was your clown name?
I didn't have a clown name.
Oh man, come on!
No,
you gotta have a clown name.
You don't have to.
One of the guys I used to work for was actually a Shriner clown. So that was always interesting. Like I like to make fun of Matt about everything else, but the Shriner clowns are pretty serious business. What they do.
The Shriners, good organization.
And they're just the clowns, and it's like a serious, like, I think his name was Nut. It was his thing. But when you see him in character, I was like, I never saw him in person, thank God, because that probably would have stressed me out a little bit more. But one of the guys that worked with us did like run into him one time when he was in character, and he said it was just like super uncomfortable because he's like a professional clown, so he doesn't break character. But that's a pretty good job back then for
for a high school kid. Yeah. No, yeah, it was. You do 1 or 2 parties in a weekend, you got $100 right there. It was good.
Yeah, it was back then. It was like fast food, washing dishes,
Yeah.
paper routes.
Yeah. Before that, like I worked at the local travel lodge, folding laundry and that kind of business.
There's a lot of those jobs you just got to make money in.
Yeah.
They were not great jobs. Like if you think about it, they weren't, they tell you a lot of character. Like,
well, it starts you on a journey, right? It goes back to the understanding the importance of hard work and actually gaining recompense for it.
Yeah. I think my dad started me on the paper route when I was like 11, I think, just to supplement the family income. It was like,
well,
but I feel like I was like 13. I was young starting the paper route. 13. Yeah, it was crazy, and we had it for like 20 some years. The paper route.
Yeah, nuts. So I took the left turn though, and I decided to start doing the entrepreneurial thing instead. Start making my own business.
Did your sister know it was you though?
Oh yeah, well she did. Yeah, but the other kids obviously didn't. Nobody else knew it was me.
I was going to say if she didn't know that, you'd be a hell of a clown then. But I don't know, you might have stick with that instead of 36 years in the military. So
yeah, it could have been clown college instead of West Point. Sure.
It's never too late.
That's true.
It's never too late.
They've reopened it, I'm sure.
But hey, so let's talk about family again. Like anybody in your family military at that point?
Yeah. So yeah, I've got a couple interesting stories there. So my father did some time in intelligence as well, and he ended up doing about 6 years, and ended up in the reserves, and then actually a small stint in the Guard as a counterintelligence agent. One of my uncles, one of his brothers, was a Green Beret medic in Vietnam. And then another one of my uncles actually was originally West Point class of 74, but he was kicked out his graduation week. Ooh. So I was there actually to see him graduate, and he did not. Now he got kicked out though for having been caught for having married my aunt, because my cousin was on the way. So he did the honorable thing. They are still married to this day. And it all kind of worked out for him. But yeah, to make it to grad week.
Ooh. Yeah, that'll be a tough one. Did you have any resentment on that? You ever talk about that part of it?
No. I don't think I think he got over it pretty quickly, insofar as, so if you know anything about the military academies, right, you know that if after your junior year, or cow year as they call it there, you go to your first class, you now owe, right? So the moment, if you drop out before that, you owe nothing to the government, but if you drop out after, you owe the cost of that education that you received up until that point. So usually what ends up happening is that they put you in as a specialist guy, not promotable yet, but as an E4, and you have an allotment coming out of your paycheck, and you're paying back your college that you have done at West Point up until that point. Now, think back of the graduating year I just talked about. What happened in 1974? Well, we were still in Vietnam, right? We hadn't closed that chapter yet. There was an interesting article in People magazine at the time because of it, and all the rest, because he had found a lawyer that there was a bit of a loophole that West Point quickly closed off for subsequent ones. They used to make you sign a document every year that you had no dependents, except going into your first or your senior year. So they didn't have him sign any document stating, so he hadn't violated any sort of honor code, lying about, he just never told anybody. Now, how it came out in the first place was his roommate. This was a from hell's heart I stab at thee type of moment for his roommate. His roommate had a girlfriend that he broke up with that week of graduation. There were lots of rumors about my uncle with his then girlfriend pushing around a baby carriage around West Point, but nobody ever actually asked him directly. She had written a letter. This former girlfriend of his roommate wrote a letter to the commandant saying, "Hey, Don Boyd, completely married," and his roommate knew all about it and didn't turn him in. So the commandant was coming down on the roommate.
That's a dick move.
Yeah, it happens. But what ended up happening for him all worked out in the end. So he went straight from West Point, did not have to go serve, and went straight to go get a master's in mechanical engineering from MIT. And then he's worked for a long time, got a PhD, and then was working for some government contracting.
I bet you that's one of those stories too, that if you tell it, like, people are like, sure, you went, that happened to you.
He still has his class ring.
Yeah. I mean, I think I've heard I think we had friends of our family that he was actually enlisted before, then went in and got in a little trouble, like the last month or so at school, and he ended up having to go back.
Oh yeah.
There's a E4 in there. It's like, holy cow. But yeah. But I get it.
Every
yeah,
class has
I
one
get
or
it,
two.
Yeah. Yeah, I get it. I mean, it makes sense that, you're not, you kind of have to have that in effect, or people are going to find a way to take advantage of it, just to get out of it and not, do the
Well, yeah,
obligation. People don't believe that, but
there are people that are
there's a
doing to
will, there's
skate
a way.
uphill.
Yeah, exactly. That's a crazy. So what drew you to the military? Was it that story, or was it some other stuff?
No. So yeah. So I like to say that a lot of things like tailor made me for who I am, right? I am the firstborn child of two firstborns, right? That already makes me like the absolute rule follower and I was an altar boy at church, right? I was an Eagle Scout. I was in junior RTC, even with marching band, I'm working on the, old FM 22-5 marching, keeping tempo and all that. There's a whole bunch of things that kind of led me. And I was always interested in the military. I had my little wild moment though, of course, going into my senior year of high school where I contemplated going to get a theater degree. And I started talking about like looking at other schools and I just really wasn't looking at much of anything by way of college other than to go find some sort of theater degree or the like. And I left the door open though by talking with a couple of recruiters because I took the ASVAB junior year to get out of a day of high school, right? Like many people do. So needless to say, I had plenty of knocks on the door afterwards. And I live right around the corner from some military housing there in Bedford that were where a lot of the recruiters ended up living, and some of the other folks that were assigned to Hanscom lived there. So my recruiter lived right around the corner. So he came over and was always talking about like, hey, what would you want? So I left the door open to the military by trying to go to warrant officer flight. I wanted to be a helicopter pilot. So now I had just started the conversations with him, but one day, so I'm a senior. This was like November-ish of 1987. He comes in the door and he says, hey, I got bad news. And my parents are there. He's like, they just raised the age limit from high school to flight school to 19. And I had only just turned 17. So he's like, I can't do anything for you for a couple of years. Is there anything,
Gotcha.
is there anything else I can offer you? Now, and he's all hangdog because of course he's got to meet his quota and the like. But my dad immediately speaks up and he goes, well, he's really good at languages. And I immediately see the dollar signs like appear back in the recruiter's eyes. He's like, oh, tell you what, I got something for you. Why don't we go down to the MEP station next week or in 2 weeks and we'll have you do the physical. I'll have your parents sign off on the documents or whatever. And you can take the DLAB, the Defense Language Aptitude Battery, to determine how you can do on languages. And we'll see how that kind of works out and we'll go from there. So lo and behold, December 8th, 1987, I go riding off to the MEP station. I go do my physical. I go take the DLAB. I see dollar signs in the testing agent when they see my score on the DLAB and they go, yep. How about it? How about 98 Golf cryptolinguist? I was like, sure. Why not? So I signed my name on the dotted line right there, December 8th, 1987. Go back, and unlike all of my high school classmates, I knew exactly what I was doing a couple weeks after graduation. I was going to go to Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri to go to basic training. And for the rest of my senior year, I never applied to a single college at all in high school. I just went straight to the Army.
I wonder if that's unbelievable. I always love hearing recruiting stories because it's always like they're like, is that how it really happened for their part of it? Like we didn't know you couldn't be 17 and go to flight school. I think it's all these things. They end up, the military ends up getting theirs. The recruiters always end up getting what they need. It's pretty interesting when you talk about, Now,
so my recruiter was an infantryman, but he could have been military intelligence because he was doing some serious predictive analysis with my parents because he said, listen, he's like, look, I've seen your kids' grades from school and I've seen all this other stuff. I would not be surprised if like within the next year or two, you're going to see him going off to West Point.
Yeah.
So now,
yeah, he's like, do you want him to go to theater school, or do you want him to be in the Army? Make your choice.
Well, all the world's a stage, right?
Yeah, that's true.
Now, so that actually takes so step 2 was getting to basic training, where they pulled a whole bunch of us out and said, all of you guys have really high GT scores, that general testing score on your ASVAB, the vocational battery test. So we're going to have you take a day out of basic training because we're not getting the numbers we want to apply to the West Point Prep School, which at the time was at Fort Monmouth, New Jersey.
Yeah.
So I got out of a day of basic training just to go take SATs, fill out a couple forms, and write an essay. And then I didn't hear anything about it again for like a year.
And then you found out you're heading to the prep school, huh?
Yeah, well, so I was studying Persian Farsi at Defense Language Institute, Monterey, California.
Beautiful place, by the way.
It is a good place to be a private first class. Which
That'd be expensive back then, though.
I was living in the barracks.
That's true.
I was living in the barracks, right? A private first class. You know, life was my own.
Yeah.
So one day they call us out to formation there at DLI. Say, hey, don't go down to Pacific Grove this weekend because there's a movie being filmed down there. Tom Hanks is going to be in it. And they're like, and we're the guy from Bosom Buddies? Because this is 1988, mind you, right? So 1988 going into 89. They were filming Turner and Hooch.
Oh, well, that's great. That's a great movie.
Yeah. So needless to say, we all went down to Pacific Grove.
Don't go there.
So
we're all going. Yeah. Why would
that's what a bunch of privates would do.
I always love when somebody tells you that they tell you something not to do something, and they tell you what it is. Like if you just would have told me not, you wouldn't even have brought it up. I wouldn't have had any interest in it. It's like when my wife always does that to me. She's like, I need to tell you something, but I'll tell you when I get home. I'm like, why would you even bring it up to me now? You shouldn't say anything. Like I'm like tell me now. I just want to wait. I'm like, then just fucking tell me that you don't have to announce it.
Yeah.
That you have to tell me something later on. It's always that's a notorious thing my wife does. But people do that a lot. I mean, if you ever notice that, like, can I, like, when we're done with this, can I talk to you? It's like, about what? Like my
right.
person, when I hear that, I can't think of anything like, what the fuck does this guy want to talk about? You know what I mean? So
right. Come out and say it. Say what you mean.
Hooch. I haven't seen that in a long time.
But yeah, so needless to say, fast forward, bunch of months later, and I get called to the first sergeant's office and they drop me in the front leaning rest. And for those of you that aren't military that are watching, that's when you start your push-up, right? And you're down in like a plank position. And they had me start doing push-ups while they're reading me my orders. And they said, well, in 3 weeks, you have to go report to Fort Monmouth, New Jersey, because apparently you're going to the prep school. So I had to immediately after that begin out processing. I hadn't finished my course. So they gave a crash course, like one-on-one instruction, so that I could take the final test on Persian Farsi.
Right.
So I could graduate. So I graduated 10 weeks early with honors.
Yeah.
So what
was that like though? I mean, you planned on doing that. I mean, you kind of take it, not really kind of know what's going to happen, and you're on your way there. Was it a little bit of like apprehension, or was it like, no,
I just rolled with it?
Yeah.
Right. It's okay. So this is what's happening next, which I will tell you is like how I looked at my entire career. You know, the term movement to contact, of course. Yeah. Right. So again, for those that aren't listening, like it's one of the forms of maneuver. So when you know an enemy is out there and you don't know where they are, you take a combat formation and you actually conduct a reconnaissance and security mission known as movement to contact in order to go gain and maintain contact with the enemy with the smallest unit possible. Basically, you just don't know what's out there, so you're just going to roll with it. Mm-hmm. My entire career was a movement to contact. Like after I got commissioned, I used to tell everybody within those first couple of years that I was getting out at my active duty service obligation. And then when it came time to PCS or do that permanent change of station and move from Fort Carson, I said, well, I'll go to the advanced course and we'll see how it kind of turns out. And then flash forward every single PCS after that, I'll do one more PCS. We'll see how it works. All the way till I was the G3 at the Intelligence and Security Command of Fort Belvoir, Virginia, when I get my final orders to Aberdeen Proving Ground to the Army Test and Evaluation Command under the Army Evaluation Center. And I go, yeah, I'll go do this one more move and we'll see how it works out. I'll see if this career thing sticks. Yeah. And then I get my email, of course.
Your whole family's like, yeah, we're not believing this, you know?
Yeah.
But you kind of got to be like, I mean, you kind of got to be like that. I think a lot of people are like that in the military. You kind of got to be flexible and just kind of roll with where it goes, and
fluid. Yeah. Flexible is much too rigid.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Good point. That's true. Really good point. So you head to prep school in New Jersey. What's prep school?
Exit 105, right? It's Eatontown.
Yeah. What's it like? What's prep school like?
Like high school and getting
80s,
paid for it.
Yeah.
Is what it was like. You were doing English classes, you were doing math classes. So interesting aspect about getting into West Point for those that don't know, right? Most everybody has heard that you need either a congressman or a senator to write a letter of recommendation for a cadet to get nominated to one of the service academies. It's not the only way in though. I don't know if the numbers are still the same, but back then they had 85 slots that were reserved for the enlisted reserve that you could get in without a congressman or a senator. And then there were 85 slots that are always set aside for the active component for the regular Army so that you could go straight to West Point. Now, you didn't have to necessarily go through the prep school, but you could actually apply to West Point if you were a sergeant in the Army and under the age of 21. You could apply to West Point directly and not need a senator or congressman. So there were about 300 students at the prep school, and they wanted to maximize the number of graduates that would actually make it to West Point itself. So they had all of us as part of the English class also write to all of our congressmen and senators asking and requesting for a nomination. So the more people that were there, because if you came straight out of high school and went to the prep school, they put you in the enlisted reserve. For those of us that were active and in the regular Army, like if I had dropped out of the prep school, or even if I had dropped out of my plebe year at West Point, I would have gone back to the regular Army as a private first class again, right back into my job. So there were a whole bunch of folk that would either fall into one of the buckets where one of the congressmen or senators. So it was Senator John Kerry who wrote my nomination letter to West Point.
So with the prep class you had, how many of the guys and gals from the prep school went to West Point?
So of the 300, I don't know the exact number. I know it was well above like 250.
Yeah, I remember it was pretty high, if I remember. I grew up there that area. I just remember that.
Yeah, it's a pretty decent percentage.
Like what would get you from not going there?
The usual types of things. Academics still are going to be a killer. Getting in trouble will still be a killer in any way, shape, or form. And some people just realized, oh, this isn't for me.
Yeah.
Again, they gave it a shot, and it is not for everyone.
So when you head there, like, I mean, you make it through there, obviously, at the West Point. Like when you guys get in there, I think you're the first guy I've had that was a prep school guy. So is there any kind of like shit from the other freshmen or plebes that you're from the prep school? Is there any type?
No,
of
it's the opposite. No, it's the opposite, right? So they unlike all so reception day, our day, right? That's the big emotional event for all the kids coming from high school. All us folk that went to the prep school, we were there the night before at West Point. We spent a night in the barracks, and we were the practice run for all of the cadets who are playing cadre for cadet basic training. So like they have the man in the red sash is who you report to first, right? On that first day of our day. Like we were the practice run. So they get a chance to practice before with like members of the cadre at West Point and family members of West Point, things like that. But we're the first actual cadets that they see before all the folks that are going up to say goodbye to their families. We had said goodbye to our families days before when we reported back to Fort Monmouth off of leave, got on buses, drove up to West Point the night before. So I was in my room. I had done all of the things, and I was in my room before like even the rest of the folk had come down from reception.
Right. I watched a lot of those. Like I grew up there, so like our day is always fun to go watch. Just see people screaming and yelling. And
well, so the drawback of that is right because it's also the this is cute, right? The having this cadet yell at me. This is nothing compared to my drills and basic. But we'll see how this goes. But they left me in the room and like forgot about me. And every so often they'd bring me some new plebe and say, hey, teach this person how to shine their shoes. Because we also already know, like going to the prep school, you already memorize some of your plebe knowledge, and you already know how to shine your boots and do all that when we used to have to shine boots, that is, right? When you actually had leather boots.
It was hard.
Well, as I think we talked before, right? I came in when Reagan was in office, right? I came in long enough ago that the fire commands were front row kneel, second row fire. Right.
That's true. But there's something about shining your boots. I feel like that's I had a lot of great conversations while you were doing that, especially in military school. Sean would know like that you spend a lot of time doing that, and it's kind of a skill too. You should be good at it. I mean,
but we still, the good news is like the Army still got all of those types of scenarios. Even if you're not shining boots, guess what you're now doing? You're still cleaning your M4. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So that's that same camaraderie.
But I actually found shining boots pretty like, I don't know.
Relaxing.
It's just a thing to do. I mean, it was always a fun, relaxing thing to do, that and ironing.
Well, sure.
Like I love to iron actually. It's like,
when you want to go off on that tangent, this is when you can start going down the road of the things that have disappeared. You don't see as many people playing dominoes or spades anymore. Why? Because they all got a phone.
Yeah.
And they're all sunk into that.
Yeah. The irony, I mean, but there's all things you had to do. I think it's one of the, like, you just think about now, like ironing, like I don't, my sons one time were trying to iron. They have no clue what they're doing. I'm always like, just give me the iron. Let me knock it out.
It's good for life lessons too.
Yeah, exactly.
But it all comes around again.
So you head there, you feel like you got the upper hand, or you got a little bit of knowledge heading into West Point.
I mean, you at least feel a little bit more comfortable with that, with that aspect of it. You don't know, there's still the unknown, right? You still don't know the rest of what you're going to get into, but at least on the military tasks, that's all fine. Physical fitness tasks, all fine. Because you already start feeling some of that anyways, when they're bringing you other new cadets that are, hey, teach this person how to do this, teach them how to brasso and shine up their belt buckle. So yeah, you feel pretty prepared. But there's always the unknown, right? So some people will feel more anxiety than others. And that goes down to again, it's just yet another transition.
Yeah, the military school. If you've never been there, even if you know what's coming, it's a little bit of a kick in the teeth.
Sure.
As much as you know what's coming, it's still a little bit stressful for everybody. But it is a great day when people show up the first day of any military school. It's always a great thing to watch. I don't think when you're going through it, it's not that great, but watching it from another view later on, it's always hysterical because you see everything that's going on, and as much as it's controlled, there's so much chaos that is going on at the time. Like I used to laugh because Sean was one of my freshmen. So the thing I used to always love is how we would always tell him to get ready, and like, you got to be ready in like 3 minutes. You know what I mean? And somebody already left like 30 minutes earlier. It was already in a different uniform, and it would just blow your mind. They would be trying so hard to do that, and you're just like, did these idiots know there's no way you're changing out of, you know what I mean? And then you just yell at that whole process is just, when you see it from another view, I absolutely love that, because you're just like, because there's a party that's like, how the fuck are these guys changing so fast? Because you have no sense of time, right? It's screaming, like it could be that it feels like 5 minutes, but it was really like 20 minutes. So next thing you know, everybody's in a different uniform except for you. You're like, how are they doing this? You know what I mean? Those first few days are always pretty well,
and it goes back to that break you down before we build you back up as well. I mean, one, it and we'll also teach them. It's all those things of teaching them teamwork and teaching them attention to detail, all the things that they're going to need for an entire career.
Yeah, I think it also, to me, is like, when you look at it now, it's like as I get older, it's also like you're going to fail like that. It's really quickly. It's like, it's not going to go your way. Like that's a quick thing you learn really fast, is no matter how squared away you are, that's not going to go. It's not going to go your way.
Oh, they've often said that about all the service academies, and honestly, it is a good life lesson in general. Like all our kids going to college and the like after high school, when they actually start taking those first steps into adulting, as it were. You quickly learn, and you've heard, like, listen, you can't really do everything all at once. Mm-hmm. So you're going to have to learn the importance of actually prioritizing. Now, we can talk many a story about even, senior commanders who haven't learned that lesson of like actually prioritizing, but
we're not going to go down that road. But
that's the lesson that comes of all of that is, look, something's going to fall by the wayside. You better make sure, okay, I'll go back to the clowning stuff, right? If you're juggling a whole bunch of things, you want to make sure the glass balls stay in the air. Mm-hmm. You can drop all the rubber ones you want. You don't want that crystal one to drop. Yeah,
and I think that it's, as I look back, I always look at that too. Like the failure. Like you do have to prioritize, but inevitably you're going to fail at it all eventually, because that's the way the game is rigged, right? It's the house always wins. It's always that's why it's always funny if you go to the military academies, or if you go become like a drill sergeant or whatever, you see that it's just when you see it a different perspective by the time you're junior and senior, it's kind of comical to see the whole thing happen, but it happens for a reason. I mean, you get a lot of people that come in like me. I thought I knew everything. Like I thought I had this all figured out, and then you just like, you get humbled pretty quick. And you're just like, no matter, like, why is this okay 1 minute, and then I'm getting yelled at for 5 minutes ago I was doing fine, now I'm getting yelled at for the same thing I'm doing. It's like, this is, you just gotta learn that you're not going to get it right, and you're going to fail. It's not going to go your way.
Yeah. So interesting that you put it that way, because there are two things that brings to mind for me. So first is the I'll do the oxymoronic military intelligence thing, and I'll be the sci-fi weenie for a moment, right? if the game is rigged, right, you got to be like Captain James Kirk in the Kobayashi Maru test and rig the game so that you can make sure you're still going to win. But the other thing that I think of goes back to like going back to on the martial arts side, right? The old Japanese swordsman Miyamoto Musashi, who wrote Book of Five Rings. He has a phrase that I love to use over and over again, and it's when you know the way broadly, you see it in all things, right? So when you know the way broadly, you see it in all things. That is the way of everything of life, right? And we fall into those trappings where every so often you can talk about the scientific Dunning-Kruger effect of you're optimistic so that you're really good, but then you realize, oh, this is hard. And all of a sudden your performance drops and things like that. And eventually you bring it back up. And at some point you're considered an expert. Like there are many times where you think to yourself, all right, I know all this. And you really don't.
Yeah.
And you really don't. I taught captains.
Yeah, for me,
who knows the most about the Army?
Okay.
A captain. Just ask them.
Yeah, exactly. But it's interesting because that's a lesson I learned pretty young. But there's a part of my life that I kind of forgot about that. Right? It just you can have that. You can have that opportunity where you don't really fail. You're not, or sometimes you think you know what you're doing. Like you have control of everything, and then the past few years I've kind of took a whole different approach on it. It's like I don't have control of it. It's going to happen. Whatever's going to happen, I can't control it. It's the same thing to go back there before, like all those things that we tell people not to forget, and I actually did forget for many years about how to deal with that kind of stuff, because you look back and it's like, today may not go my way. It doesn't mean I've lost the war. I just lost today's battle. You know what I mean? And that's how it was back then. I mean, it was like a daily struggle. And that's kind of how I like to live today. It's just like, you got to take it day by day and win the day.
Isn't that the same thing? I mean, we're talking about military suicides before. I mean, isn't that the same thing? One of the big challenges there too. It's we keep coming back to the same themes over and over again, whether you want to talk about grit or resilience, or it's really about mastering transitions, right? And anything that you're doing.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like, we've been doing this for a while, and I'm on my own journey when it comes to, PTS and my own struggles with suicidal ideologies and stuff like that. So it's like, I don't know if it's having the toughness to get through it or like all this kind of stuff. It's just, it's those words, like you have to have grit to get through it. And I think that's kind of I get it. I get where that comes from. But I'm more of now the days of like, you just have to have, and I've talked about this a lot. You just have to be open about how you're feeling. So like, I don't know how grit falls into that. I think it's more of like courage, the courage and it takes courage to tell people how you're really feeling. You know what I mean? And it's not easy, right? Because we're scared to say, hey, I don't have this, especially in the military, especially like the warrior class. Like people look at us all the time as like having everything figured out. It starts easy. Like just think about it's an easy concept. We wear stuff on our uniforms that tell us where we're at in an organization. So there's things that we look at that person and we expect them to know or do. And sometimes we don't fucking know. Like I remember being a lieutenant being like, I am the least fucking person that have any knowledge about what's going on. Everybody's asking what to do. I'm fucking scared shitless. I don't know what the fuck I'm doing, right? Yep. I'm just going to make a decision, right? That's one thing we're able to do is make a decision, right? And that's a lot of how my career was in the military. Like it was like whatever, like you were put in positions like that. So, people, and then when you get out, people still look at you in a certain way, like you're going to handle these things, or like you're not scared. Like my big thing is like, I used to like pretend like I wasn't scared. I was fucking scared a lot. And I just never said it. Right. I never was able to be comfortable to say like, you know what, man, I really don't want to fucking do this. I was the exact opposite. I'd be like, what, don't be a pussy. We're going to do, like, I'd have to get like that whole thing going. And I just wish I had the courage a lot of years ago to be honest with how I was feeling, to be honest with other people. And I think that's the key to the veteran suicide thing right now for me.
Yeah, no, I'm with you on that. So, so when I talk about grit though, I look at it. So it's not just grit, because it's exactly what you said, in that you have to have a little bit of personal courage as well to go ask for help, right? And to also recognize yourself as being a human being and like you can't overcome it all. When it comes to grit though, like I start thinking along the lines of like, if you've never experienced hardship, what are you doing the first time you've got it? So in addition to you asking for help, and this is one thing that the Army's been trying to, and the whole military has been trying to do, is they're trying to push services, which is a good thing, because you don't want it to just be passive, right? So one, I think just like with working out and breaking down a muscle group so that it can heal, and that's why you have to rub a little dirt in sometimes and get a little grit in you so that you can, like, Ranger school is a test, right? I didn't go to Ranger school. I'm perfectly happy not to have gone to Ranger school, by the way, but sorry, Sean, but and my nephew Liam is there right now, getting ready to go. So, but all of it is again, you can't. It's in throughout life, like as we raise our children too, you can't completely coddle them, because if we coddle them completely, then they don't experience hardship. And that first time they experience hardship, are they going to have the support network around them to help? Right. So asking for help is one thing. Getting help is also, and accepting help isn't something also completely different. Like, some people aren't open, like you were talking about, to actually accepting help. They aren't open enough to ask for it and don't have the personal courage enough to ask for it. And leaders I'm going to jump forward in time for a moment, right? So I was a garrison commander at the kickoff of the pandemic. So there's a whole bunch of people that are scared, right? I'm putting all of these restrictions on them. You can't go more than X number of kilometers, because I was in Germany, X number of kilometers from your house and things like that. If you live on post, you're locked down to post because we have a commissary and you can't go to, and I'm doing weekly Facebook town halls, right? So going back to your point of like I'm making decisions just based on the information and data and recommendations that I have. I put as much of it together as I can, and I'm making a decision, the best decision I can make. But the issue is when I'm on that Facebook town hall, like, so I was General Dempsey's aide de camp when he was the commanding general, 1st Armored Division in Baghdad. One of the biggest takeaways I ever learned from him is sometimes, as a senior leader, you're not allowed to have a bad day, right? When people were watching those Facebook town halls, they didn't want to see me as a person. They didn't want to see Adam Boyd. Yeah. They want to see the garrison commander and know that the garrison commander is trying to help them, like getting the medical command doing what. When I left command, there was one of the German papers or the local Stars and Stripes or whatever. They said, hey, you put a lot of restrictions on. And mind you, I left command in July 10th or so of like 2020. So like we were at that first little lull where we thought we might have had it licked type of thing. They said, hey, did you question any of your decisions? And I cocked my head and I said, question my decisions? No, I had the entire community available to question all my decisions for me. True, yeah. Right? So, but to bring it all home to what you're saying, like, I'm in violent agreement with you that a big thing about depression, because whether it be the chemicals in our brain, whether it be the overwhelming thoughts that we cannot turn off in our head, that your feeling of loneliness, whether it be like, that's really what we keep circling around. So the question is how do you combat that? One, help people not realize that they're not alone, right? Which means you got to kind of sometimes recognize that they might be going through something, because some of the most depressed people are the ones that are high performers. We can point to a whole bunch of them. You've highlighted a bunch of them, right? They are all high performers and nobody knew. And it goes back to that simple buddy check of like, how are you doing? When they answer just the one word, fine, dig a little deeper, right? Are we actually pushing and caring about our friends and family circles and those that we work with and our soldiers to know actually what's going on in their lives?
Yeah, I think like what you said was interesting. One of the things is, as a military, as an officer, just anybody like a senior leader, and anything, everybody and you said no one wants to see you have a bad day. Well, that's kind of bullshit, because no matter who you are, you have a bad day. And I think that's one of the things that ends up happening is like, you see these people, like everybody looks like they have everything squared away and they don't. And that's one of the things I've learned is like, I don't hide behind, I don't hide behind a mask anymore and try to pretend like I'm doing great. Like, when I talk about a lot of stuff, I've had people be like, holy shit, I never imagined that you thought about killing yourself. And I'm like, I thought about it all the fucking time. Right. But I wasn't going to let you know that, because it wasn't, I didn't feel like it was safe, number one. And then the other thing, it was just like, it just, some people weren't ready for that. Like, and I think now that I'm honest with how I was in the past and how I still feel, right. I think that's a powerful thing, right? Because it doesn't matter who you are. You can have a fucking bad day. Like if you're a mom, you can have a bad day, and it's okay to have a bad day. It's okay to be upset. It's okay to see that walking around like a robot Yeah, no one's perfect, but that's sometimes what you look at. You're like, oh my God, I'm struggling right now, right? I'm having a problem with this. And I look over and everybody else is doing great. Like they seem, and then you ask them, right? And they go, oh yeah, I'm fine. I don't have a problem with that. And that's the culture we grew up in. And and I think that's one of the key indicators of why we have a problem with this, because we feel like I felt like I was alone. I felt like for a long time that I was the only person feeling the way I felt, right? And come to find out, when you start being honest with people, like everybody feels that way. I mean, it's maybe not as often, but those same things that go through your head. And I think that's an important thing when that's the human experience. And I go back to that whole thing, like when you brought that up about, that our day, and like, remember my stuff going through that, like I always look back, and a long time ago, I said to a veteran that, like, and I was trying to convince myself, was like, the worst thing that ever happened to me in my life that happened in the past, right? They're probably not going to happen today to me. Right. They're really not. If they do, it's going to be a really bad day. Right. So I'm not going to dwell on that anymore. Like I really look at that stuff as the past. It happened for me. It made me who I am today. But yeah, just the whole thing of being able to say, like, I understand the grit, because you do have to have grit. We're going to get knocked down. You're going to get back up. It's like, you lose a job, you can find another job. You lose a relationship, there's another relationship out there. It's just, yeah, I think a lot of it too is just having the courage to say, I'm not okay.
Right. And barring that, having good people around you, like if you're not courageous enough to do it, do you have the right network around you that will recognize and be able to like push help on you?
Yeah, I mean, and then is the buddy. It's interesting bringing the buddy check up about this, because I have like this mixed thing about it, because like a lot of like my alma mater started the buddy check, and people buddy check you, right? So it's great. Like somebody could buddy check me, but people buddy checked me for a long time, and I lied about it. I bullshitted you. Sure. I could bullshit you through it. So when you if you talk about that, I think the buddy checks, like you mentioned, is you got to know, like just randomly buddy. Like I haven't seen Sean in how many years. Like for me, just to call and buddy check him, yeah, it's great. But I mean, do I really know what he's going through? Like,
right. It's got to be the close circle.
Yeah, it's got to be somebody and it's got to be like, you got to dive into like,
and now you just right now just gave that leader lesson for that squad leader, right? Know your troops. Yeah. Right. That goes back to, do you actually know your soldiers?
Yeah, because I always think about now, because especially when I'm preparing for a podcast, and you're finding I'm finding someone who took their life, and I'm like reading it, and like so many of them were so successful, and I just, the people I know that have committed suicide, no one is like, oh, I knew he was going to do that, or I knew she was going to do that. It's always, holy shit. Everyone goes like, I never knew. I never saw this coming. And I think that's a reason. It's like what we were talking about before, is because we're all walking around, bullshitting each other, right? We're not being honest about how we feel. We don't have the courage to say, I'm not doing okay today, Adam. Like I need to talk, and, today I might need to cry. I might need to I might need to just, stay home today. I just need something. Today's not a good day for me. And I think that would go a long way, especially when you have a position of authority or leadership over people that are watching you to see how you react to things. And if you're always like, those toxic leaders are just, I don't even say it's toxic, because it's just the way it was, right? It's how the organization was. You just can't show how you're really feeling, right?
And, so I'd take it a step further though, because like even like nobody would have claimed that General Dempsey wasn't like human, right? And did not emote, right? But he meant that as a general term for like those highly sensitive, like, now granted, we were in Baghdad at the time, you were talking about trying to get everybody home safely, not thinking about that next step after that, but he did later. But I think like, cause even in my time in Garrison Command, my entire job was about taking care of a community, right? I was a mayor. I was a town manager for 4 different installations. So like all of them saw me also as a human at times, right? It was just like, there were discrete circumstances where, okay, this is the thing. This is the thing where they're looking for that leader. And you need to, like, if you're getting ready to go from the ORP, that objective rally point, and go seize an objective, it doesn't matter how scared the lieutenant is or scared the platoon sergeant is. They're gonna buckle up to go seize the objective. And then you can show some human side after the fact and go, hey, look, I was just as scared as you were.
No, I know there's like obviously the situational stuff where you can't be like,
Yeah,
you know,
no, it's not because you use the term.
Lieutenant
You
commander
use
go
the
like
term,
screaming
right.
like but I just
You use the
just,
term robot,
yeah,
right?
but there's I mean, I think if you look back, there's always like that emotion, right? Like when you really like you'd have like the emotion of anything. If you were worried about something, it was like, well, suck it up, and like, what are you talking about? Like, if you
Sure.
talk to somebody about I'm struggling,
absolutely.
I'm
You're
struggling
absolutely
about
right.
leaving my 3. What the fuck you talking about? I left it. Like just
Yeah,
just
you're
this
absolutely
whole
right.
this whole thing of like I get what you're saying, but I think a lot of the emotions that come out of it is like a lot of seniors, because I was guilty of it too. Was like anger, you know what I mean? When everything the pressure was off, that's when you tried to like be a normal person, but there wasn't a lot of really talking about how you were.
But there
as a
was always
human.
pressure.
Yeah,
right. There was always another pressure.
Yeah, but I think a lot. Yeah, I mean, it all is a situation. It can't be where everybody's running around. That's not what the institution is.
Right.
But I just
you're
think
not
a lot
turning
of it
into
can
robots.
It does start at that like lower level when you're talking to people and understanding what's going on. Like to be able to come in,
the real key.
To be coming in and say, "Hey, I'm struggling here," and really listen to them and do that and hear them out.
Because that build also going back to further reinforce your point. Like the more human you are with your subordinates, like the more they're going to trust you.
Yeah.
So that when that time comes, then they're going to know that you're just as scared as they are, but they are also going to see you be steadfast in whatever it is you need to get done.
Yeah, because I looked at like I always go back to the story when I was a company commander, and we got a new guy, and he's wanted to get chapped out of the Army, and they brought him in. That's the first thing he wanted to get chapped out. He's telling me that his basic training company commander said the AIT guy would do it, then blah blah. It was like it's where I'm at, and I didn't listen to that guy at all as a human being. It was more like, what what are you talking about? You're a paratrooper. This is your job. Like you can get out in 4 years, and we like me and the whole chain of command, basically just bombarded this guy for like 20 minutes. Like it was. If I look back at myself and I'm like, holy shit! Like I used to brag about it, right? I used to be like, oh my gosh. I had some great comebacks. I had some great lines in the whole thing, but the guy ended up trying to kill himself. I mean, he took like 2 bottles of Motrin. I mean, it wasn't going to do anything, but the guy ended up going to the psych ward, and come to find out the guy had a pre-existing medical condition that the recruiters had said, hey, don't talk about it, whatever. Right. And they ended up chapping him out. But I go back to that time and I'm like, man, what an insensitive person I was, right? I didn't hear this guy out. We just laid into this guy, right? And luckily he, took Motrin instead of doing something else. Or like that guy how I look at it is that like I would have contributed to that, right? And the reality is like to sit down and be like, what is really going on? Because they don't do that, and that's the point where this guy's coming out of AIT, airborne school, they're at the unit. Like, what are you worried about? Like, what is going on? And I guarantee if we would have continued to have the conversation and that eventually happened with a medical professional, you come to find out, like, if that guy would have told me in that conversation, my recruiter told me to lie. I have like, I have a pre-existing medical condition. I would have been like, holy shit, I would have been able to help the person. Instead, what did we do?
And again, and the good news is on that side, on the medical side, at least, the Army is increasing the number.
Yeah.
They've created an actual military occupational specialty for behavioral health specialists. So again, but the resources isn't enough, right? Because you still got to have a chain of command that cares to know their soldiers, to know what they're going through, to be able to get them to the resources.
Yeah, exactly.
The resource all the resources in the world can exist, but if you don't know that they're there, or if you're not willing to go, or if you don't have a chain of command that's not going to let you go, then we're all doing a disservice.
Yeah, because I think once it gets there, I think once you get to the medical health professional, it could be too late. Like honestly, right. I haven't thought about in a while that situation, but I was like, man, if he would have chose something else or had access to something else, I don't know how that looked for me. You know what I mean? I mean, I definitely would have had that. We, contributed to that with what we were doing and what we said to him, and just having no regard for that guy's, worst day was actually getting to where he was supposed to go. And there's, I wasn't the judge and jury in that situation. If something,
right.
I could have handled that so much differently. And I think that's just what we grew up in. I'm not trying to make the institution wrong, but I just look at situations like that where I could have been more human and more honest about things, and not, showing off in front of, 4 or 5 of the guys. And
again, for all the toxic traits that you did see, there are plenty of, I mean, again, the Army is a large place and we are full microcosm of society. There are still enough folk out there that absolutely care about their fellow soldier.
Yeah, and it's not that I
That's
didn't
the-
care.
Yeah.
I don't want to sound like I didn't.
No.
It's a weird
yeah.
thing, but just that different.
No,
I feel like there's a different. Like I'm in a different place too. I'm not in that class anymore. I'm not in the war class anymore, so I don't have to be that person anymore. But the problem is, I just took that person when I got out in 2005 and continued to. That was the person that was walking around the world, the rest of the world, and it just wasn't. It's not a place for it. It's like there's no need to be.
And so
how we were,
So my 36 years is inclusive, obviously, of my cadet time. It is 32 active years, right? With which is, as another interesting aside, all the service academies, that they're part of the active end strength of each of the services. I don't know if you knew that from the bean counter side of the thing. When they say, like, if the Army's 565,000 people, 4,000 of them are the West Point cadets.
Right.
But what I will say is I over the course of that 36 years, I've watched. Do you remember the old Band of Excellence?
Mm-hmm.
Right. So as it ebbs and flows, where you see every so often we creep back in and we go back to it's got to be harder again. Oh, it's got to be hard. Oh no, and that also correlated with how many people we needed in the Army for what we're doing. Every time we started getting smaller, we tended to get a little harder on our troops.
Yeah. Right.
And so when we had moral waivers and we needed like these large upticks because we don't do a draft, we'd kind of step back in terms of those discipline type of things as well. And people would get themselves in trouble. And then if you already had problems, it only made it worse.
Yeah, that's true. It's just I just I know it's changed. I know the military's changed. I mean, you've recently gotten out, so a lot recently. You've been a lot more recent than I have, is a better way to put it. But yeah, I know it's changed. I always have a hope that we got to continue to change it. We got to continue to change it for to fight the epidemic that's happening. There's something that's missing.
Yep.
And I'm at that point in my life where I just keep throwing something at it until it sticks to help. And I just have it, to me, is just to be. What helped me is just that, to put down the mask, put down the armor, and admit,
be transparent.
Admit that I'm scared.
Be transparent.
Admit what I am and what I'm scared about.
Or translucent, at least. Right.
Yeah, I mean, I got I can't be my complete self with everybody, which is fine. But I just don't hide behind that I have my shit together all the time, because I don't. You know what I mean? I talk about my feelings. I talk about my feelings now when I'm upset about something. I'm sad. Like, it's, not to get into details, but my dad and I had a conversation about something that happened. And like in the past, I wouldn't have said anything to him. I just would have like internalized it and then like just build resentment about what happened. And then, a month or 2 months from now, I'd be fucking pissed about something else and start yelling about it has nothing to do with it. So, for me, it's being open about how I'm feeling is huge. And I think it's helped me to help other people as well. Because once you let down your guard for other people, I've found to be very powerful, that they're like, holy cow, if you can be honest, well, guess what? I need to tell you something too, or like, I got to get this off my chest. And that's how, that's how it worked for me with other safe men. And that's the way I continue to live my life now.
Yeah. Good way to be. Yeah. Good way to be.
It's just hard not to, that's just not the way society is, though, for some people, which is fine. So let's talk about, we got a long way to go, but let's talk about the most difficult part about West Point for you.
That's hard. I enjoyed my time at West Point. Like I almost jokingly said, so I majored in languages, because I find I have a facility for them. So I was going back to being tailor-made for the conflict set for a while. Yeah. I also majored in Arabic and French. So I had Persian, Farsi, Arabic, French going into the, the post 9/11 years, which was very helpful in a lot of respects. But I also didn't have to do much homework because of that, because it was pretty easy. So I like to say I majored in judo. So I got to be the captain of the judo team, enjoy my time. There are a lot. But I suppose, like anybody, the initial transitions of, as I go kicking a wire.
Wire out.
Yeah. Plebe year probably there were still challenges, obviously, because you're forming up your team in the company and all the rest. But I don't know that I look back and go, oh, that was the hardest thing.
Yeah. I look back to mine was just like I just like the competition part. Like we're always in competition with each other. You don't realize it at the time, but it's just the personalities, right? You always want to be, higher on the OML. You want to be, you want to be more physically fit. You want to be doing you want to be doing all the things. And there's for most of us, there's a lot of multitasking that's going on, right? And then if you take roles like with where you train freshmen and all this kind of stuff, it's just like the juggling act of all these like. It's all that stuff felt so comfortable to me, but it was still challenging to juggle all those balls at once.
Sure.
I mean? That's a difficult thing because, for me, I just continued to do that. Through my whole life until I finally said, "Hey, I'm done doing that."
That's exactly what the Army wanted you to learn,
No,
right? What was what used to be the difference between the officer evaluation and the NCO evaluation? Well, the NCO is graded against a standard.
Yeah,
the officers are graded against each other.
Yeah.
So it's always looking to your left and the right, and I just want to be faster than you. Yeah,
and it's always crazy to think about that. As we get older, and you think how long ago it was, and it just all the there was so many great times. I think about that too. Like I asked that question because I feel like to me I don't really have I don't even know what I guess the most difficult thing was going back to school. Like when you leave and have to come back. I mean, would be the hardest part. But then once you got back there after the first couple hours, it was like, okay, everything is fine. So for me, it was like coming back.
The gray period.
Getting freedom and coming back. You're like, oh, fuck. Like if you see that, like we all feel the same way. Like, there's a certain part. I just, last September when you see that sign, you're just like, this is a part of you. I'm like, I didn't say to myself, like, they're not going to do anything, but you still feel that like, oh no. But then like an hour later, you're back at home,
West Point has a little rhyme about that, right? So on Sunday night, you have your 6 p.m. formation. So it's 6 bells, all is well. Another weekend shot to hell. Another week in my little gray cell. Another week in which to excel. Oh, hell.
That's a good one, actually. Yeah. I've never heard that one either. It's a good one. It's a good one. So let's move on. We got a lot in the military career. So you head out to Fort Carson, your first duty assignment.
Yep. So part of me saying what was interesting is, so one of the benefit of going to West Point was you were supposed to know where you were going as your first duty assignment based on your order of merit list, where you ranked in the class, right? So they took all of us military intelligence folk and they had all the slots that were available and they started counting them down and they looked at the number one person and said, where do you want to go on this list? And they picked it and then it went away. I went to the basic course thinking I was going to Fort Gordon, Georgia, because I wanted to be in at the time, 513th MI Brigade was there. They now Fort Eisenhower. That's where 513th still is. They were the Middle Eastern MI Brigade focused. And I wanted so desperately with the Farsi and the Arabic to go to that particular brigade. I was high enough in my rank, class rank, that I got it. And then when I was at the basic course, like all things in the Army, right? Things change multiple times over. And I was called in and they said, hey, the ratio West Pointers to RTC is a little off. You're not going to Gordon anymore. Where do you want to go? And so I said, well, if I can't go to the job I think I'm going to be best suited for, let me go to Fort Carson because the Olympic Training Center is there and I'll just go train judo, while I'm there. So I get to Fort Carson. So I was like an extra lieutenant because at the time, 4th Infantry Division was getting ready to move their headquarters and a couple of their brigades down to Fort Hood. They were no longer going to be at Fort Carson. So I went to an inactivating armor battalion, 368 Armor, as my first duty assignment. I spent my first 7 months as a second lieutenant after the basic course in an inactivating armor battalion as an assistant S2.
Oh, that sounds lovely.
Yeah, no, it was not overly pleasant. A lot of arms rooms inspections, a couple threat OPDs here and there. I did get to do a couple TDYs out to Fort Irwin to go learn about the opposing forces out there and the like. But that entire time is when I was telling everybody, oh, if this is what the Army is, I'm getting out. I'm done. I'm not doing it. But I also started an MBA program and I forgot it. So it's a University of Phoenix. This was back when University of Phoenix was cool, right? The early days, No. So I started an MBA program because I had all this time on my hands because we weren't going to do gunnery or anything because they were packing everything up and it's all going away. And then 3rd ACR, 3rd Armored Cav Regiment moved up from Fort Bliss to Fort Carson. And that's where I went. And I spent the rest of the time at Carson in 3rd ACR, where I did the assistant S2 thing down at one of the squadrons. In fact, one of my squadron commanders there, retired Lieutenant General Terry Wolf, Another great quote from him was, listen, it's all about building lethal platoons and mastering transitions. If you can do that, you can be successful in anything, right? Lethal platoons, build them, and master transitions. And you can extrapolate that to other things in life too. Build the tool set and then master those changes that are going to come, because it always will come. But so did that, and then went down to the MI company, which happened to be in the same squadron, commanded by a major, and I was a support platoon leader and executive officer there. But bunch of Pinion Canyon rotations, which was the training area that we would go to for maneuver, gunnery right there in Carson. We'd do the NTC rotation. Great story for that NTC rotation, rotation 9801. So it was in October of 97. Best story I got on that, going back to transitions, and this is just a complete aside, was there were a bunch of us, 6 buses worth, driving back to Fort Carson, and the snowstorm hits Denver. Now, if you don't know Denver to Colorado Springs, the 25, the highway that goes through there, goes through Monument Pass, and if it snows, that will close down, and you can't get through there. Now, we stopped for dinner in Vegas on the way, and I was all happy because I won like $200 on video poker, got a dinner. And so I'm like, okay, well, where's the karmic balance going to come in? And that came when we hit Denver, and we were all snowed in, and we're trying to figure out what's going on, because like the snow's just still coming. Now we got a bus driver who's like talking about like, I've driven for 25 years. I've never had to put chains on. We're all fine. And then we get to the bottom of a little hill and we're just spinning out. And he's like, I got these chains. Can anyone help me put these on? Because I've been driving a bus for 25 years and I've never put chains on. So we have a whole bunch of soldiers out there pushing this bus while trying to get chains on it. And then finally we get it going and we hear on the radio, hey, you got to go to the mall. I don't remember the mall's name, but this is the gathering area while we're in this little mini state of emergency for this little blizzard. So we get to the mall and they decide, hey, we've got cots set up here, but you're all soldiers. We trust you all. We're going to put you down on the floor in the mall itself, where all these kiosks only have a small sheet of like tarp.
What could possibly go wrong?
Well, there was a reason at the time. It was also called the 3rd Armored Criminal Regiment. There were a bunch of things that went awry that evening, but yes, 6 buses of 3rd ACR troopers sleeping at a mall, coming back from a rotation at the National Training Center. And then the next day we got up and then they moved us to a little high school because they didn't want us sleeping there at the mall anymore. And then lo and behold, we finally made it home. So there's that kind of brings up and then to wrap up the Fort Carson chapter. So I extended my time at Fort Carson. I got promoted to captain there too. Went to the engineered advanced course as part of the branch mix program as a deal to allow me to stay long enough to have my daughter born. Because at the time my wife Kristen was pregnant, and so Olivia was born at Fort Carson, Colorado in August of 1998. And Olivia is now a captain in the Army, currently serving in the NATO Brigade in Belgium.
Awesome. The oldest is in
the youngest. She's the oldest. The youngest, Colin. So he was born in Germany on September 1st of 2001. And we can talk about that. Yeah, but September 1st, 2001, 10 days before 9/11. He is a first lieutenant in explosive ordnance disposal, and he is currently serving in Korea.
So carrying on tradition. What's that like having those guys, both of those following your footsteps?
First, it was surprising that both of them went. I didn't necessarily expect them either. I'm proud of both of them for deciding to serve. And they both have they're experiencing all the joys and all the pains associated being young officers in the military. My daughter Olivia started as an Army officer, and now she's transitioned over to adjutant general. So she's also started learning the difference of I understand now what the difference of my armor troopers were versus
everybody else.
Yeah. So it's a little bit of an awakening for her as well. But yeah, as a father though, with them serving on the other side of the world, it's that mixed bag, right? So I have anxiety, of course, of them, serving,
right?
Like that any parent would, but at the same time, having lived it, I know the training that they've got. I know who they are as people, and I know they'll be able to succeed. And we'll see what comes.
Are they planning on staying in career wise, or is it still kind of? Are they like you? Like just we'll wait till the next life event and then make a decision.
I'll just assume that they're going to start it as a movement to contact.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Like 36 years later, they'll be retired.
Right. And to use the old Seinfeldism, right? It's the yada yada yada, and here they are.
So you leave the captain's career course. I mean, I love that we're talking about other stuff, so we can blow through the military stuff if you want, and just kind of highlight them. But you had your first deployment after going to Germany, right? You had to Germany.
Yeah. So 5 years assigned to 1st Armored Division, which there's another entire story, which could be another entire podcast on what I used to tell people on how not to deal with your branch rep when dealing with trying to get. But suffice it to say, I ended up in Germany. I landed, and not to give you the long diatribe, I spent 3 weeks in Germany getting bounced from post to post before they finally settled me back at the place where I had pinpoint assignment to in the first place. So I went to 1-1 Cav in Büdingen in Germany. So I was the Division Cavalry Squadron S2 intelligence officer for them. Great organization. We've given back Armstrong, Kaserne since to the Germans. But then I was a company commander. So I was a company commander for 9/11, which made for interesting times. I was in Bravo Company, which was a direct support military intelligence company that supported the 2nd Brigade of 1st Armored Division. They were out of Baumholder. We were in Dexheim, and we moved the MI battalion from Dexheim to Wackenheim. 9/11 happens, and then I spent a good, the next 3.5 months guarding housing areas with my company 24/7, because Force Protection Condition Delta was like the word of the day.
Nobody knew about
the word of the day, and I had a newborn at home.
Yeah.
And then from being that MI company commander, I went down to Baumholder next, where I was the Brigade S2 for 2nd Brigade. And that's what I deployed. So I deployed to Operation Iraqi Freedom. Like all people in 1st Armored Division, we did all the train up as if we were going to be part of the attack. And when the SecDef Donald Rumsfeld said, no, go with what you got, we then got relegated to, we were the 2nd tier, and we ended up replacing the brigade that did the Thunder Run, 2nd Brigade of 3rd Infantry Division. So my brigade replaced them. I was in Baghdad on May 10th or so of 2003. So only 3 weeks after the fall of Baghdad. And then flash forward just a couple months after that, I went and became the commanding general's aide de camp. And I spent the rest of that, because we got extended. So that was a 15-month rotation. I spent the rest of that time, though, seeing the things that I didn't expect to see again at an echelon I didn't expect to see by following a general around.
Yeah.
It was very interesting.
So Division Commander's 2-star then for people that aren't at the time.
Although he got promoted to his 2nd star while in command.
Yeah. So it's always a bit, when you're the aide de camp, I actually finished 2nd to an aide de camp job, and I found out years later that it was the best time to not get the first thing. Because the guy in my advanced course was his aide de camp, and we were talking about it. He was like, "Man, I wish you had gotten the job."
Oh, I interviewed.
Why was it? He was like, "Let's just say it wasn't a very fun job. He was a very difficult person to be." And I was like, things happen for a reason, right?
Oh yeah. I actually interviewed to be the previous commanding general's aide de camp a little over a year before. So when I left company command, I was supposed to go work in the battalion S3 shop, and they were all excited about that. And then the brigade commander down in Baumholder did a by name request for me to come down to be his brigade S2. So on my way out the door, I had already moved the family down to Baumholder, and they said, oh, by the way, you're going to go interview to be the CG's aide de camp, which was back up in Wiesbaden, which was another 45 minutes up, which would have been fine. I mean, we live in Wiesbaden, and then we moved to Baumholder. If they had done it before we moved, that would have been one thing. So I went into the interview, actually, and the first question was, why are you here? And my answer was, sir, because my command told me to be here. He said, do you want to be the aide? I said, no, sir. Respectfully, I do not. I don't want to be. And honestly, the writing was on the wall for us getting ready to go to Iraq, because we were already in Afghanistan. There was talk about Iraq because this was what, May of 2002. So there was already rumblings of it. And I told him, I said, listen, I just moved down to Baumholder to be the brigade S2 for 2nd Brigade. And I think I can do more for you and for this division by being the intel officer down there than being your aide de camp right now. now. And then he said, okay, now why should I hire you? So then I laid out my bona fides and said, now flash forward. My brigade commander asked, because I was at the tail end, right? I had been almost 4 years in Germany at that point, and like Branch was like chomping at the bit to get me back to the States. And they put me down to go to Fort Irwin and said, we're penciling you in. And then my brigade commander said, hey, I know you're supposed to be like PCS now, but like, I really want you to come to combat with me. I was like, sure, there's no question. Right. So he ended up retiring, Lieutenant General J.D. Johnson. So he said, hey, will you come? And I said, yeah, absolutely. No question. I will be there for you throughout the fight. Cause we were still thinking it was going to be a fight.
I think I would still go to Iraq or Afghanistan to go to NTC. So NTC's awful.
Yeah. So all of that being said, like, when we first got into Iraq as OIF 1 was going on and the mission was starting to change and the like, they were going to change all the brigade commanders out because it was their time. So my brigade commander called me and he's like, hey, I know I asked you to come to Iraq with me, but I'm going to be, no. So we were there. This was like 3 months in. He's like, but I'm going to go now because I'm changing command. And as such, I'm going to make you the one rep for this brigade to go interview with the new commanding general. Now, it just so happened, General Dempsey, who took command of 1st Armored Division, was also the 3rd Armored Cavalry Regiment commander when I was there in 3rd ACR at Fort Carson as well. So I was already a known commodity.
Right.
Now, there were others from 3rd ACR that were known commodities. But he asked me, hey, why are you looking to get the job? And I said, sir, because my job here is coming to an end because the next brigade commander is going to want an actual major and I'm just a senior captain. So I'm going to be coming to work for you anyways up here in the division analytic control element, the ACE. So yeah, I would absolutely love to be the aide de camp and see what goes on about commanding this division. And he said, well, would you feel bad about like doing those menial tasks? Like you got to get me meals and you got to be, sure, I wouldn't feel bad about that at all. Right. I understand the job of the aide is to take all those menial tasks off the shoulders of that commander so that they can actually command a division. I couldn't be prouder of that time. No, yeah.
No,
well,
I just
the joke was, hey, what would you say about being my aide? And I said, cock my head and would say, sir, do you take 1 lump or 2 in your coffee?
No, my one friend, Jeff Fry, he was the ADCS's aide for 4ID. He got that job. And it was like a week into it. He's like, I don't want to do this. And he was like, what's going on? He's like, this guy's fucking particular about the type of paper clips I use. I just got a lecture about, he likes this type of paper clips. And he's like, he wants them colored. And he's like, then he wants me to find some sledgehammer and all this kind of stuff. He's just like, what the fuck am I doing up here? And he ended up only staying, I think, like 3 months. Cause happens. He went to the ADCS and was like, sir, can I talk to you? And he was like, well, what's up, Jeff? And he's like, I don't really want to do this anymore. He's like, well, I don't feel like it's working out because he didn't hire him. He kind of fell into it. So he's like, I'd rather have one of my guys that kind of know me, but he ended up getting they sent him to the hospital. So Jeff was happy after that. He was a med service corps officer. So it's just, you just hear some good stories about, about what that entails.
Yeah. Well, again, and your job is there to make
just bigger
things
pictures.
easier.
We just hear the funny stories about it. But,
oh yeah, of course.
You ready for a whiskey break?
Sure.
All right, we'll get some. We've talked a little bit. So tonight we haven't had a Woodford product in a long time. It's not my my go-to, but this is an oldie. One of our past guests, episode 75. Joe gave this to us. So have you ever had any Woodford stuff?
I have certainly.
This is one of the special releases. So Woodford is located in Versailles, Kentucky. It's formerly known as the old Oscar Pepper Distillery, and later the Labyrinth and Grandman Distillery. It was distilling at that location has been going on since 1812. And the whole area is actually a National Historic Landmark because of all the distilling stuff that's on there. But the Pepper family sold it to Lambert and Graham in 1878. They owned it up until they sold it to Brown Forman in 1941. Brown Forman operated from the distillery until about the 1960s when they sold the property to a local farmer. They then repurchased it again in 1993 and they created the brand Woodford Reserve, and that brand launched in 1996. This is one of the bottles of the distillery, the Reserve Distillery series. So they release 3 of these, I think up to 3 of these a year. So these are, you usually can get them at the distillery or local whiskey store, liquor stores in Kentucky. But yeah, you can always see them because they have a different label on them, and they're always the 375. So this is one of the ones. This is 2022. This is actually the honey barrel. It's kind of started the trend of a lot of people doing it in honey. So what they basically took was traditional Woodford, sent it. They emptied those barrels. They sent those barrels to a local beekeeper who then aged his honey in these whiskey barrels, and then they sent the whiskey barrels back to Woodford, who then put the bourbon back into it and let it age. They don't tell you how long it is, but it's not age stated, but 90.4 proof. It's the traditional mash bill, 72% corn, 18% rye, and 10% malted barley. And again, it's finished in stored honey. It was stored in barrels that once had honey. They don't tell you how long it is, but so it's like the original honey barrel. And I'm not a Finnish guy, so it's be interesting to see how this one goes. Okay.
Why, thank you, Con.
You're welcome. You gotta hand that to Josh and those guys. Josh is the chopper. Try that. I don't get much honey though.
Mm-hmm.
It's sweet. But I am proud of myself because I did drink a whole thing of scotch. What people don't know is what I was drinking earlier was scotch. I'm not a scotch guy. It was the Lagavulin Caribbean cask. Usually, if it scotch, peated scotch, and everybody knows me, I'm like, oh my gosh. But I made it all the way through. I'm proud of myself. That's it. You saw me rinsing out the glass, but I'm still like, I can't use this glass. It's still peated.
Too peated.
For me to drink scotch is very, very rare. The peated stuff always gets me.
Well,
that's a good one. The Lagavulin stuff is really great. The Lagavulin collection.
I would just comment and a shout out to my daughter Olivia, who just went to Iceland for a long weekend, and she bought an Icelandic whiskey that was smoked with sheep dung. So instead of peat, they have used sheep dung. We'll see. I haven't had it yet, but we'll see.
I'm surprised. I don't know if I still have like the peated. I still have that flavor. I'll try to get that out, but I don't get a lot of honey though.
You can smell it sweet on the nose, though.
It's sweet, but I'm going to continue my streak and say that I'm always underwhelmed by the distillery release collections. So, but thank you, Joe. We'll still drink it. We'll still enjoy it. I'm not getting. I was kind of expecting. It's not as good as the honey one that Nathan did. Yeah, this just brings back some good memories. Wish we still had that.
I agree. Sweet, but I don't know that it's a honey sweet.
Yeah. So we're booking. We're having a good conversation. Let's do some more military stuff. Let's talk about. I mean, we could talk about your career. It was a long time. But one of the questions I did. I mean, you had 2 tours to Iraq, 1 tour to Afghanistan.
Yep.
How did those experiences, you think, impact your mental health at the time, and then
I mean, I'd say the hardest mentally was, so initially I would say going into Iraq the first time, obviously just your first time going to combat is definitely stressing. That definitely, like, you see things that you shouldn't see, right? Mm-hmm. Like I've told other people, it's not hard to be shot at. Sometimes it's hard to get missed. Thankfully, I have been very lucky for having been shot at, not been hit, right? I have no Purple Hearts. I was not put into like significant, I mean, we're all in danger, right? Yeah. The biggest thing I think, when I think about the first deployment, that is where you get numb to things, right? And so, especially like indirect fire, like my favorite story to tell people of the, like, and it's not a good thing. So after a long day going out with CG, come back, hadn't eaten anything. We actually had the DFAC at that point. We're not, long gone are the burn shitters and that kind of business. So we're actually living a little bit better life than when we first had piss tubes and burn shitters and living off MREs. But then we also now had like other amenities that are sitting at Baghdad International Airport. There's an actual little mini PX type of thing. So I figure, okay, CG's settled for a moment. He's going and freshening up. I'm going to go grab myself some chips or something just to eat, because we'd been going at it, and this was like 1900 at night. I go walking in, quickly grab like a Gatorade and a bag of chips, go up to the counter, and I'm getting ready to pay. And then about maybe from less than from a goal line to about the 50-yard line, that inclusive of the building, like just right outside the door, we had a couple 107mm rockets hit right there. And everybody, we have third country nationals that are like running AFIs then. Everybody goes scrambling. And I'm just standing there holding a bag of chips and holding like a $5 bill in my hand going, I'm not going to eat today.
No.
And you're numb to it. And I'm like, okay, I'll put this down. Rockets are still landing, and I'm walking back towards the D main, the division main. You get kind of like numb to it. You wake up in the night when the rockets are hitting, or you got mortars or what have you, and you go, oh, is that first one? Is there another one? No, I guess I don't need to go to the shelter right now. And you go just lie back down in your rack. That's not necessarily healthy. Right?
Yeah, definitely not.
And you quickly, like, I found myself quickly in the second deployment falling right back into habits, right? Where you just kind of like, you are anxious when you're on the road because you're looking for IEDs. But when it comes to artillery, you're just like, well, if it's my time, it's my time.
Yeah.
It's a different kind of.
Yeah, I thought it's always like, the point was like, you when you were doing stuff, it was like, it just, you weren't worried about it's kind of strange. Like when you were, for me, it was like when I was, when you were sitting around doing nothing, like you were just, you're hyper alert. Like you're just like, it was just like, that's when the worry was like, what's going on? But like when things started happening, you're just like, it's just, if it's going to happen, it's going to happen, whatever. But it's always weird. But yeah, that numbness, like, where do you think that went? How else was that?
I don't know that it went away. Yeah. Right. Like I don't jump as much on loud noises.
Yeah.
Like, so if something like goes off, you hear the crack when people like, first of all, we all quickly learn what is outbound and what is inbound sounds, right? Mm-hmm. When it comes to artillery, but you hear the crack of what could be gunfire, or it could be, the popping of a tire. You just pause for a moment. You think, okay. And then you think nothing of it. I don't know that that's best for your self-preservation at times, though. That remains to be seen. But for me, I think the second deployment was probably worse for like my own psyche. And that was because I was an intelligence officer. So second deployment was to Mosul, and that was in the height of the surge, 07 to 09. And I used to describe like Iraq was like a thing of toothpaste, right? Like they were squeezing in Baghdad, and where was it going? It was all going up. It was all coming up to Mosul. And that's where all the fighting, if you go back and look in that time window, Mosul is where like all the action was happening. So we had also, on top of all that, we had like a whole bunch of green on blue incidents. And for those that are listening that don't know, like the green on blue is when you have who you think are your allies, that's the green forces, firing on you, which is blue. Because normally you talk about enemy and friendly is blue and enemy is red. Green are supposed to be your allies or an indigenous population. So like we're partnered with Iraqis. Like we had Iraqis kill that we were partnered with while on mission, turn their weapons on us. And now us being the unit,
yeah,
right? Killing our soldiers, wounding some of my buddies. But I look at that as a failure on my part. I was the intel officer. I was supposed to be identifying what the bad guy's supposed to do. Like, and now logically I recognize, hey, look, I couldn't have known all that, but emotionally you kind of tie yourself to it as like, that's my job.
Yeah.
Like that my job, I should have stopped that from happening by identifying the threat so that they could have been better postured to be able to react, or to know what might happen, or to have better screening operations. Yeah, that hurts. That hurts.
Yeah, but I think it's also the enemy's job to exploit what you've done before. So that's just
of course
the nature of
logic versus emotion,
yeah,
right?
Exactly.
So this goes back to the, like, when we talk about being in our own heads, right? Part of being in, like, I've been accused many times in my career, being that military intelligence professional that I am, of like overanalyzing things, to which I also looked at the squadron executive officer who told me that. I looked him in the eye and said, "So I think that's what you pay me for, right? That is my job." But sometimes being a little too far in your own head can be bad for you. But yeah, I mean, going back to, that's probably where, it's different than, like, having an ID go off, or, that never, like, that just gave me numbness. Not so much like I was never a driver. So my hypervigilance is a little different than somebody who was like either a gunner or a driver driving on Red Irish in Iraq, or, doing one of those types of things. It's still there, but it's not quite the same. I've done only a handful of foot patrols ever in those. I did them, but it wasn't quite the same. So not enough to necessarily ingrain it in me the same way something like those green on blue attacks, or any of our, like, when I couldn't identify, hey, this is, or make the prediction of, hey, this is where we think the next little ID cell is going to really be operating, because, that's our job.
So do you think you've gotten over all that guilt? And
I don't know that you ever get over all of it. Right. Because, I mean, again, in the wee hours of the night, you still think about it and go, what else could I have done?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is one of those things where, you made the best decision you can with the information you had, and and you can't hold that. It's, what's going to happen is going to happen, and I hope someday you can just, you're not
logically. I recognize that,
but sometimes it's talk about that. Sometimes it's okay to say, I hear people say it's not your fault. I mean, that you were just doing your job, but like you said, we said earlier, sometimes you're going to fail even when you're doing the job the best you can, and I'm sure that nobody blames you for that. So you should.
No, thanks.
If ever comes up in your head, just don't blame yourself, man. So what about all the things you talked about? You said seeing things you haven't seen, you weren't, that humans aren't supposed to see.
Oh yeah.
Being away from your family, how did you deal with all that mental stress of those deployments?
I mean, again, like, first deployment is much different than the second, and certainly much different than my Afghanistan deployment, which was 17 to 18, right after the War College, but before going to Garrison Command, because that deployment was the easiest in terms of staying in connection, right? Because we had all the technologies in the world by then. Like in 03, 04, as we were talking earlier,
there was nothing.
There wasn't much. Once in a blue moon, I'd get an email off, write a letter, and things like that. So, and it's a little different. It wasn't out of sight, out of mind, but it wasn't. You get very focused on the mission, and you don't think as much about the family.
I guess not as many distractions, which was
right. Well, it's a blessing and a burden.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. Yeah,
because it's like, I've talked with other friends. When the kids go off to college and they come back, they don't think anything's new with mom and dad.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
Nothing has changed back home. We've all fallen to that.
Yeah, true. Very true. So there's some other topics I want to talk about other than military stuff. So let's we obviously your career, like you've done so many things. Like I said in your intro, you've been a garrison commander in Germany. When you finally left in all the way in 2022, Aberdeen Proving Grounds. You've done all these great things.
Retired last year. Yep.
Yeah. So you've had a super successful career. Looking back, because I do want to talk about some other stuff. I think it's some other topics which are, I think very important in the podcast and what we like to talk about, and you listen to a lot. So with those things, with all your military career, 36 years, we'll give you credit for West Point and being stuck out in Monterey, California, toughing it out. Like what would you consider your biggest accomplishment and your biggest failure?
Yeah, that's an interesting thing to peel apart, because the biggest accomplishment probably was being garrison commander, right? For all the other good mission sets, because like taking care of soldiers is like a day-to-day occurrence as a leader, but taking care of a community is something completely different. So I will look back on that probably the most fondly. And it's funny because I will quote, and I want to give credit where credit is due, right? So I'm not giving names to name drop, but more to, so at the time, Brigadier General Norrie happened to be the 7th ATC commander at one of the 7th Army Training Command right there at Grafenwehr. So he's the senior general on post. And he put it pretty plainly at one of the little mini town halls. He got up and he looked at everybody and said, listen, all of you out there would not question how I command 7th ATC or how then Colonel Tom Hof would command 2nd Cavalry Regiment over there at Vilsec. But every one of you and your grandmother thinks you can be a better garrison commander than that guy right there, right? Because again, nobody ever thinks about how the city runs until you don't have hot water, until the firemen don't show up on time, and when the lights aren't going on, right? So that nobody thinks about how things run. It's like being a signal officer, right? Nobody ever cares about the signal officer until comms is down.
And it could be, this isn't just because it does apply, but like when you make upset mama, then there's gonna be a problem. I just remember that's where the dependent, you're gonna make enemies really quick. But that is true. Yeah.
So I would say,
I never heard my wife was like, God, I don't like how.
So
yeah, everything that they complained about was the garrison type stuff, or the type of support or lack of support. I mean, that's a pretty noble.
Yeah. So of all the things I've done, it's like the thing that wasn't like, it's not like something you think of that directly, because nobody trains and to become a garrison commander, right? Like I was a military intelligence officer. Like I went from there to being the operations officer, the senior operation for the operational and strategic intelligence command that is intelligence and security command. Like I went back into the intel world, right? The secret squirrel world. But that job, I was taking care of a lot more than just the soldiers that were there. Yeah. Right. So I also had 80% of my workforce were German nationals who had been serving in that community since the end of World War II. Like they were all like children and grandchildren of people who were living there when the war ended.
Yeah. And arguably, I mean, like no joking side at all, arguably like taking care of the families is huge, because, that's the biggest thing for us to be able to go do what we did. And what people continue to do is you got to know that your family's taken care of back home. And that's a huge thing. That's a very noble undertaking. Yep. And yeah, it's important because, I never questioned that when I left that there was going to be water on post, all these kind of things. And just, it is different being over in Germany in a different country, but I still think that's a very noble, difficult job to do. And I have it as that, like I've always said, when people, tell me thank you for my service, I'm always like, you need to thank the kids, the wives, everybody else.
That goes back to what's probably my biggest failure, right? Of the, like, I hope that I don't, the question that I often ask myself is, did I take for granted what Christian and the kids were going through? Mm-hmm. Right. So I think the first time that hit home was, so after I left battalion command. So I went from Fort Huachuca, Arizona, where I was in an AIT, the advanced individual training, that first place a soldier goes to learn their job after basic training. I was an initial entry training battalion commander, which is a whole podcast unto itself. Both funny and not so funny. But I went from the high desert of Sierra Vista, Arizona, a whopping 15 miles from Tombstone, Arizona, where the West was won, to the National Training Center at Fort Irwin, California. So we went from one desert to another. My wife's comment at the time was, "Oh, I really should have appreciated the high desert of Sierra Vista before I'm now in the middle of the Mojave at the wonderful gated community that we have known as Fort Irwin, 45 minutes north." My kids were both in high school at Fort Irwin, which, if for anybody that's ever been there, Silver Valley High School. So one of my classmates, who's a general officer right now, Kurt Taylor, actually went to that high school. So you go from Fort Irwin, because there is no high school in Fort Irwin, and it's almost an hour drive one way across a single 2-lane road, nothing but desert on both sides, down to Silver Valley, which is right by the railhead at Yermo. And that was the first time my son looked at me and said, "Dad, you can retire, right?" And I said, "Don't worry, this is a 1-year gig. I'm either getting promoted or off. Right? But do we have to really stick around here?"
To stay here. So I still remember a story when I was I just made captain. We were ending an NTC rotation, and one of the company commanders, I was the S4 at the time, but he was getting an assignment to Irwin, and his wife came at the end of a rotation. so he could show her around. And so we're expecting him to go on leave. And like the next day we see him, we're like, what are you doing? You know, and he's like, my wife left, she went to Vegas. Like, what do you mean? She's like, she woke up and saw this place, and she's like, we had a little bit of a spat. She's in Vegas, so I'm gonna have to go. I'm gonna go later on tonight. I'm like, oh my, but yeah, because I feel like it hasn't got any better.
No.
So, in the middle of nowhere.
So if you have younger kids or you're single, great place, great mission. So the community actually is very good for, like, they take care of each other there that very well. So if you're younger, but if you got high school age kids, it's pretty terrible for them. And so my family, you know, they left me there for the last rotation. As soon as school ended, they left.
They're like,
they took off, and I finished the last rotation. But yeah, we did a lot of time in Vegas. We did a lot of time. So the one comp weekend that you get a month, we'd be either up in Vegas or down in San Diego or LA. But yeah, so and for all the resilience that the kids had, right? Like I think back when they were really little, and we were at Fort Hood, Texas. That was the time. So that was the longest stint that we lived in one place, right? So because I deployed 07 to 09, but I got there in the summer of 06. So we were there from 6 to 10 because I got back and I was a Squadron XO after I got back. So we had a long stint there. Just before I deployed, the kids were looking around and they said, shouldn't we be moving around now? They like inherently knew that it was time to go. So like they got used to that pretty well. And again, it consistently amazes me on the resilience that military kids end up having.
Yeah, I think it is one of the things. Like it is interesting when you have moves like that. You are open to other possibilities, right? It doesn't mean you have to stay put, and which is good and bad for some kids.
Sure.
I think, yeah.
Sure.
But so anything else you want to talk about military career?
No, we can veer off to some of the other topics.
Yeah, so we'll talk. I mentioned this. You have mentioned judo. We did mention a little bit. So you have been doing judo for a little bit. I want to go on record first because we both have a classmate and is your best friend. Who will win in a fight, you or Tony Clemente?
Oh, I'll let Tony win any day of the week.
No, come on. What's the real? Do you think you could take him though?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, depending on the rule set, of course. If we're doing close quarters, he's going to shoot me real quick, right?
But yeah, I think it's funny. We were just talking before, like Tony's one of my classmates, and I always see him. I always live vicariously through him and his jiu-jitsu stuff. But I always watch him, and then he's so into it, and I love it. And you guys all love him, and I've watched him from afar, like moving around and
Tony's the best.
Yeah,
Tony's the best.
Everybody loves him. But then you see him, like he'll put a post like, "Oh, my back's fucked up." This and the first thing I'm thinking was like, Tony, stop doing jiu-jitsu.
No, but that's
I know.
But again, that's another form of therapy.
Yeah.
Right. That ggets that dopamine going and those endorphins, and it's good.
Yeah, but it's just funny. I was just giving a hard time. But you've been into that for a long time. Like, does that and like we could talk about music as well. Do you find that as being something that helps you with your mental stuff?
Although I will say I haven't been on the mats in quite some time right now. Looking to get back right now, but the good news is the mats are always there for you, right? And there are so many good organizations like the We Defy organization that they support like disabled vets, Mission 22. There's a whole bunch of those organizations that have aligned themselves and recognize like the benefits and the camaraderie that you end up building by getting on the mats. Yes, it's a little close quarters. And again, it may not be for everybody, depending on how claustrophobic they are, because you will have another person sweating on you. But honestly, like it's one of the best things. And for
why is it therapeutic? Why is it therapeutic for you?
Well, one, like any stressors that you have quickly go out of your mind, right? Because somebody's trying to choke you or actually bend something that's in a way that it's not supposed to be bent, right? There's a lot of those jokes, right? It's like folding laundry while they're still wearing the clothes. It's murder yoga, depending on how you want to phrase it. Like you can't help but not focus on the here and now when you're actually on the mats. That's the beautiful part of it, right? It helps turn off that inner voice, and you don't have a chance to think about other things.
And it seems like also a pretty tight community as well, right?
Yeah. And again, you'll find feds and felons on the mat, right? Simultaneously. It is all walks of life. They leave their opinions usually at the door, depending on the gym, and they're very welcoming, right? Because as I tell people, listen, for people that are scared about trying it, look, if it hurts, you tap. When they tap, you stop. You don't break your toys or you don't get to play. So everybody is about safety when it comes to that, right? Because you want more training partners to be there. But that builds immediate sense of community and camaraderie because you will find all walks of life there. So if you happen to be that true Intel nerd that, is a Star Wars or Star Trek, you're going to find your people there on the mats. If you are an avid shooter, combat or competition shooter, you're going to find your people. Those avid hunters, the vegans, you're going to find all walks of life on the mats. And you're going to find your little group of people. And now, to the outside, everybody would go, oh, it seems very cliquish. It seems very tribal. Yeah, there's a lot of that. But at the same time, it's also welcoming at the same time. And now there are meathead gyms out there. Most of them are not anymore because it wouldn't survive. It wouldn't survive as a niche sport if it weren't like that.
So what's kept you off the mat for a while?
Again, the loss of my wife certainly kept me off the mats for a while. And I was kind of veering towards doing other things at the time. And so back in September, I started violin making school. And I was doing 6 a.m. class and it wasn't necessarily conducive. And I wasn't necessarily finding that right time to get on the mats. Now it's settled. I'm almost fully through the first year of schooling and it's now back into I now understand this pattern and I can get back on the mats. The good news is, having trained as long as I have, the getting back into the swing of things won't be difficult. It's just the matter of getting back into the swing of things. But I will tell you, because I was going to use that as the segue of I'm doing violin making, right? It's another interesting art that gives you a lot of focus. Working with wood and working to build a piece of art that somebody else is going to make art can be very rewarding. We all part of one of the things I wanted to talk about here was about transitions, right? Yeah. I've certainly had a couple significant transitions over this past year of taking off the uniform and moving back into Massachusetts. It's always interesting when you spent a career in the military because you have all your military family and friends, but they're scattered all over, right? Mm-hmm. You always end up coming back for another duty assignment and you see them. But then when you hang up the uniform and you land someplace, you might have 1 or 2 of your friends still from the military that might have landed in the same area or somewhere in close proximity. And I got a few classmates. There's about a dozen classmates of mine from West Point, most of whom I didn't know at school, but a couple I actually have served with that happen to be in and around the Boston area, which is nice. But other than that, I have my family there, all the families from New England. So I came back to family who I haven't really seen much over the last 36 years since I left. So it's an interesting transition. So looking for things to do as you hang up the uniform, and it doesn't matter whether you've done one enlistment or whether you end up doing 40 years in the military. Again, when you know the way you see it in all things. When you're on the jiu-jitsu mats, the point of transition is where you are weakest, right? The moment I move, I'm going to stretch an arm. The moment my arm is stretched, you might be able to take that elbow and hyperextend it and do what they know, as an arm bar. I might offer up my neck and in moving this way, and all of a sudden you put me in a guillotine choke and I'm tapping real quick. So we're all very vulnerable in transition. I don't care whether that's on the mats or in life. You're at transition, and going back to what we were talking about of anxiety, depression, all the things can weigh upon you at a moment of transition. So you got to find a way to master that transition. Going back to the Terry Wolf quote, how do you master the transition? Now, for me, it's always been about, okay, what else? There's so much to do in this life. How can I help people? How can I help myself? What else is there to learn? Because people go, oh, you must have played violin a lot. No, I didn't play a lick. I don't play a lick. I do happen to play the Irish bouzouki. I've been playing that only a handful of years, but I play at sessions, at different Irish sessions around. I go to a pub in Salem every Sunday. Very cathartic to play music. And every session I've ever went to, there's always a fiddler there that goes, man, I wish I had someone to be able to work on my fiddle or do a good setup for me and things like that. And I put 2 and 2 together as I was looking for a lutherie program to build myself a bouzouki. I found the North Bennett Street School and I'll give a plug for them right now. So North Bennett Street School, nbss.edu, right? It is America's oldest trade school. It's in the North End in Boston. They have 9 programs. So they have carpentry, preservation carpentry, cabinet and furniture making, locksmith, piano technology, advanced piano technology. So that's tuning and that's kind of repair and building.
Piano technology sounds cool though.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
It does. Jewelry making, book binding, and violin making and repair. It's been in the North End since 1881. Right. In fact, there was one of the old Union officers was on the early board of directors, and they brought it to the North End in order to like give immigrants something to do because they were also looking to master transitions of coming to this new world. So they would teach English and Italian there, but it was for the Irish and Italian immigrants that would land in the North End to find a career. They also had like daycare there at the time because they were also trying to help integrate these new immigrants into this country. So big plug for North Bennett Street School. Their mission is excellent on trying to keep the trades alive. But I found that school, and lo and behold, it's also accredited, and it has an opportunity for those, if you happen to be going through the voc rehabilitation and employment program through Chapter 31 with the VA, or if you're going through you've got GI Bill, right? And you want to do Chapter 33, Montgomery GI Bill or 9/11 GI Bill, they accept both. But you get an opportunity to work with your hands. We've got a big vet organization within the group. And it's also cathartic, right? Because again, you're building something with your own hands.
So let's talk. I mean, you willing to talk more deep about the loss of your wife, or would you rather not?
Sure.
So you've had a lot go on. I mean, for like, you like I said, you spent, 36 years in the military.
Yep. We were married for 30 years.
Married 30 years. You retire. I'm sure your life looks a lot different than what you thought that was going to look like getting out, being able to have some time with her. So in that short time you retire from the military, you lose your wife. Like what's kept you going? Like, cause you seem like you have it all together. Like what's
here's what I'll start with. Yeah. Like, again, this goes back to like all transitions are hard, right? Although it like on paper looks like it just happened, like a snap of the fingers. She was first diagnosed with breast cancer as I made that last PCS, that last move to Aberdeen Proving Ground. Like that was a 2.5 year journey. The beautiful part was nothing was left unsaid between us, right? The fact that I was in an organization that allowed me to go to every medical appointment. I will say nothing but good things about Major General Jay Gallivan and Mr. Chris Barrett of the Army Evaluation Center, right? They afforded the opportunity for me to be able to help care for Kristen. Like life is what happens when you're making other plans. So to get the diagnosis hurt. And then it was an interesting journey of ups and downs, right? We went through a round of chemo, a mastectomy, a round of proton radiation, thought things were taken care of. She still had some thyroid cancer. Lo and behold, we get ready for an exam to remove the thyroid, and they said it had spread to the liver, lungs, and bones. We moved back here to Massachusetts, and there is a clock that is ticking. We don't know none of us know how long we have left. You make the most of the time that you do have, and you love the people that you love while you can. So we're in the mad scramble of now trying to establish a home, still being hopeful and as optimistic as we can be to try to eke out just a little bit more time. Flash forward to actually, honestly, the first real big scare. I mean, it was all scary. One of the bigger first scares was in the end of 2023 when she dropped like 35 pounds in a couple weeks. And I thought that was going to become it. Changed chemos as we moved back. She started putting back on some weight. Get to the end though, as we, just going through chemo. She was the one who pushed me towards going to school, but she wanted me out of the house. She was like, hey, look, you've been to every one of these other appointments. I need you to stop coming to all these appointments. And then flash forward, changed chemos again around October of last year. And within a week and a half, we go back into what I thought was chemo brain, like where you get very hazy about things. We go in thinking that we're going for a chemo treatment, end up in the emergency room and find out that she has multiple tumors in her brain. It had spread through the lymphatic system into her brain. And that was the start of the true end. My biggest thankful moment is the fact that the kids got to get home in time for the end. That was questionable of whether they were going to make it. They both had chains of command that bent over backwards to get them back on emergency leave. So when you say, hey, you look like you got it all together. Well, the fact is we've had all those discussions on like, hey, look, life is definitely worth living. Mm-hmm. There's a lot more to experience. There's a lot. I mean, Lord knows, like when I was an aide de camp, I made cards for my commanding general so that he didn't forget every soldier that died in his command while he was in command. And he had 2 packs, those that were killed by the enemy and a larger stack of death by non-battle injury. I saw death on a daily basis and in the most horrendous ways and the most questionable ways, from the NCO who was playing soccer and breaks a kneecap and dies on the operating table when a blood clot gets broken, to the person who was blown up or shot. We know life is precious. And again, it's about choosing life. And so while I am happy, I am very happy for the time that we had. I wouldn't sully her memory by wallowing in grief. So, the country singer Stephen Wilson Jr.
Don't know that one.
Worthwhile. I'll play a song for you later. I won't get you into any sort of copyright issues by playing it here right now.
I don't think we.
But what
that might be a first for us.
So there's one of his songs, and I think he puts it pretty nicely. Like, grief is only love that has nowhere to go. That's like the chorus of one of his songs. Like, it was. I mean, it's a poetic statement, but absolutely true. So, and it's funny because unless you've lost, like, the military community is the closest to me in that regard, not just having been part of it, but like, we're all the ones that have lost people. Like everybody loses somebody at some point, and it depends on how close they are. Cause it's one thing to lose like a cousin. It's another thing to lose your partner. But at the same time, life continues.
Yeah.
Right. You don't, that's the phrase. I don't know if that like helps give you some insight into.
No, I didn't mean to think that you weren't. I mean, I just wanted to, I don't want you obviously to be wallowing in grief either. That's not what the thing, or to imply that you weren't grieving at all. But it's just, I like to talk about real conversations because
no, absolutely.
That's a great, I can't, say adding into what you said and how you deal with it. Right. And I just wanted the listeners to hear that. So I really appreciate you, being open to share that. I really do appreciate that. And I'm sorry that happened to you. And I think, you had some good words of wisdom about, dealing with stuff like that. I mean, a lot of it is,
it's another transition.
I mean, we are going to all experience loss and I think it can kind of roll into like what we've seen in our class, the warrior class, when we, a lot we do for a long time, for me, at least, I grieved the people I lost. Right. I wallowed in grief. Drank, did some things that probably weren't very healthy. And if I look back, and it's a true thing to see, like, I'm sure if they're looking at me, like they're not like, they'd be like, what the fuck are you doing? That's not how I want you to remember me. And it's a life lesson for everybody. And I mean, I think it's important. When you lose somebody, it's part of life, but you also don't need to, you can grieve them in different ways, right? You don't have to be paralyzed by it. It doesn't have to be the reason why you can't be successful at trying new things.
And if the other statement holds true, look, like we all continue on as long as there's somebody out there that still remembers us.
Yeah.
Right. That's the other beautiful part of it. Doesn't matter what you believe, but the fact is anybody who's touched another life, there are many people out there that even that even that young private that you may have laid into will still carry something of you forward, right? It's a memory, all right. It's a memory. You won't be forgotten.
Maybe not a memory that I want to remember.
No. But again,
no, it's true. Yeah.
That like we all touch lives.
Yeah.
Right. And that's a wonderful thing in the grand scheme of it.
I'm sure your wife touched lives. Man, she'd be proud of the kids and proud of what you're doing. And glad she, I'm just, it's very humbling to hear that, I don't know if humbling is the right word, but it's just very, nice to hear how you're dealing with it and a very healthy way to do it. And I think it's a good, really good word you said about it. So I really appreciate you sharing that and doing that. But the piano, I mean, the violin thing is super interesting to just try something different. Nothing,
it's definitely fascinating. It is an interesting mix between art and science.
Yeah, I was just talking to some guys that we work with the Save War, and one of the the ACA promises we talked about, like Saul uses that a lot. One of them is I learned to have fun. You know what I mean? And one of the guys is like, how do you have fun? And that's that's exactly, you seem like you're having fun. Playing an instrument, doing that work. You know what I mean? He was just struggling on that. And I think that's one of the things I forgot how to do for a long time. Because I was so afraid of what other people thought. Looking stupid, not looking good, but just have fun, man. If you want to try it.
As a garrison commander at the pandemic, I said to my family, that's the most famous I will ever be. People were making memes of me. There were drinking games made of my town halls. Listen, I have no shame. There's what.
No, I mean, I think you still, I say that too, but I think there's a part of it, when if you look at having fun though, I think you just got to try stuff. I mean, for me, I was always worried about everything else.
There's too much in life
stuff. I just didn't feel like I had time to have fun. And
that's the problem, right?
Yeah, and then before you know it, you don't have time.
You have to make time.
Yeah, exactly.
Like anything worth doing is worth working for, worth fighting for, and worth making time for. Mm-hmm. There is too much in this world to experience.
Yeah, and for me, it was important for me because I knew, I just didn't feel like I had time for it. You know what I mean? Or the fun, and then the fun stuff that I was doing, I thought was fun, really wasn't. You know what I mean? If I look back at it, but yeah, I try to make that as an important thing, like what you're doing with playing an instrument. You know what I mean? I've been having fun with the Nike shoes I've talked about before. I've started doodling again, doing some stuff like that. Just doing it and doing things I've never do. Like I was just down with my niece's graduation in Houston, and we went. My nephew and I, the day we were there before we left, we went and did the Andretti, go karts and stuff like that. And to be honest with you, 2 years ago, I wouldn't have done it. I would have found a reason not to do it. You know what I mean? And I had a blast. You know what I mean? It's my knee was a little sore.
Yeah,
I couldn't figure out what it was, but I think I now remember why my knee was bothering me after it. But yeah, just get out there and have fun and try new things. And that's the big thing with the mental health, is just finding what works for you. I mean, I think you've got a good combination of the music, work with your hands, the
jiu-jitsu is still part of it. So what I would also say, and I'll throw out one more shout out to Greg Sinelli right now. So retired petty officer, or he's a chief. He was a Navy corpsman, but he's a fireman in Saugus, Mass, and he's a jiu-jitsu guy as well. He put it pretty well. It really resonated with me. Is look, as we hang things up and as we get older, everything boils down to finding purpose and relevance. We all want to find purpose and relevance, and I think even for our earlier discussion, on depression and suicidal thoughts and just in general, mastering transition, finding purpose and relevance. If you can do that and you can continue to be amazed with what is out there and be interested and go find the things that are either fun, interesting, or things you can be passionate about. But it boils down to, do you have purpose and relevance? And that usually means doing stuff for others, not just for yourself.
Yeah. That's why I love these conversations, because it just ties into, because purpose is huge for me. I had purpose all the wrong way, right? For a long time. And, just probably the past 4 months, and maybe a little longer than that, I definitely know what my purpose is. It's to come back for other men, to work with other men, to have conversations like this. This is a true thing that I didn't know this was going to happen, 3 years ago when I started this, but it's become my purpose. You know what I mean? And it's so interesting to do that, just to, when you can find that, my purpose doesn't include anything to be the best paint rapper, all these other, other titles I had. That it's just what I am, who I am as a person, my declarations of who I am as a person, and my purpose is, to come back for other people and to serve men. Like that I've always wanted to do that. Now I just know this is what it is. You know what I mean? And I mean, that helps me get through the day. It not only get through the day, but it like saves me at the same time. You know what I mean? It's interesting how many times, we talk to the men all the time with Saber Warrior that we're working with. They're saving our lives every time I have a phone call with them, every discussion we have. And it's just crazy to me now that like all these things that, we like to say that, like to get rid of addictions, you have to get commitments, right? And one of the things they talk about, and Saber Warrior, like a lot of the OGs is like, before you know it, your life is full of commitments. And before you just don't know when it happened, and just like, holy shit, like that just recently happened in the past few months. I'm like, holy crap, how did this happen? And it gives you purpose. I mean, I know that that's the most important thing. That's what I've been looking for 52 years. And when you find that, and it's different things, right, for different people.
Now you're back to
definitely serving.
Slickers.
What's that?
Now you're back to the movie City Slickers, where Curly Joe goes, it's about the one thing. What's your one thing?
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, it's like, and I always had it that I was serving others, right? Like, from the military, and I have it, and that, I had that way, but it wasn't the same as
it wasn't focused.
It wasn't. I mean, it wasn't focused. It wasn't probably authentic either, right? Like for a long time, for me, if I'm honest, like I like to talk about real shit on here. Is like a lot of stuff I used to do to take, to help people was for me to look good, right?
Mm-hmm.
And to mask, to hide what, all the fucked up shit I was doing or how fucked up my, behind the scenes was. But like a lot of times I really wasn't truly caring about other people. It looked good, right? When you were doing these things for other people,
sure.
People pat you on the back and you look good. So part of it, part of me, I was wanting to do it, but a lot of it was motivated by looking good. Right now, it's different now. It's completely different where now I am serving people like I've always wanted. And it is, once you have that purpose, that one thing you said, right. It makes a huge difference. And it's always great to hear people talk about that, because I think it's important. And that goes to anything, like what purpose is. I can't tell you what your purpose is. I can't tell you what you need to do for fun. You just have to figure that out for your own. I can only tell you what I'm doing, and hope that, hopefully it helps. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So, you've been a senior leader in the military. You've seen a lot of our, your friends take their life. We talked about it before the podcast. And I always ask this question of all the guests, like what, with all the focus around, veteran and warrior class suicide, what, in your opinion, what is the one thing that's not being done that needs to be done to help curb the epidemic?
We certainly have awareness. Right. So let's talk about for a moment what is being done. So because that just reviewing the bidding kind of will go back to, I'll go back to the intel stuff. Right. We're looking for where is that weak point in the enemy? Where is that point of penetration? Because we have resources, right? We keep building resources. We keep trying to find more resources. We have awareness, like we have all sorts of organizations that are talking about it, but that's just it. Although he was a horrible Confederate general, Nathaniel Bedford Forrest is pretty famous for a couple decent quotes, aside from naming Forrest Gump and all that. Talking ain't fighting, right? So we have a lot of people that are talking about it, but I think the biggest gap that we consistently see is one that we've already talked about. It's like, how do leaders, communities, and friends connect the person that is struggling to the resources that are there? And sometimes that's a matter of not having, because awareness is one thing, right? Actually being able to recognize in someone that there might be a problem is something completely different, right? It's the old, you might encounter a lesson, but did you really learn it? So like the biggest gap that we have is probably the identification of our friends and family that actually they're struggling, and then to actually getting them to the resources that are there to help them, whether they are avoiding it, whether they don't recognize that they have a problem, or whether they're just like trying to hide and afraid to actually go. Sometimes you need to physically take them to and put them in front of a resource, and not just have a resource there and, oh, it's there. That's very passive.
Yeah, I think start off with the tie into what you said at the beginning of the comment is like, I have it too. Yeah, there's never been so many people talking about it. There's all these organizations. There's awareness that's out there, and we had a guest who's at Ohio State, Dr. Bryant, he's kind of, he's talked about all that in his book, talks about that a lot. And I'm in the middle of that is, all that's great, but it's not working. Right. It's not actually, it's not working. All those things are great. Identification. I don't mean to shit on it, but like the buddy check stuff, all this stuff, it's out there, but it's just still not working. And like you said before, it's great. It is. I have it as that it's
a symptom, not a root cause.
It's that individual's responsibility to get the conversation. To me, it's starting conversations, right? That's the key thing, is having real, authentic conversations about things, right? And then when you can have true, authentic conversations with other people, the facts come out. And then once you have that trust in someone, that honesty, you can. I don't want to say like push them to it, right? Because for 50 years, a lot of people were pushing me to get help. And trust me, the more you pushed me, the more I dug in, right? It wasn't until the part of me knew that, I'd hit the end of the road, right? That I've tried everything to be happy, but having a conversation finally changed it for me. And I think that's the key thing is, having, being open and talking about, talking to people and really digging into just not taking the buddy check, like, you said before, right. Like, it's like with your kid, like, how's your day today? Good. You like, I don't know any parent, I know parents that do that, but the odds you're not getting the true story there. You got to dig into it, but opening that conversation. Once you get that conversation of trust, I think you don't have to push them. I think people will launch to those organizations. But it's having that, that initial conversation that a lot of people are avoiding. Right. I don't want to tell you I'm having a bad day. Right. I
don't want to put that on you.
I want to look good. Right?
I don't want to put that on you. Yeah.
Or I want to look good. I want to seem like I got all my shit together because that's what society wants us to do.
That's what all social media wants.
Yeah. That's what the world wants. Right. Everything's great. Like, you look on Facebook and it's not true anymore. People are because showing the bad sides of themselves, but no, it is true. I think that is a great point. Like that's why I struggle with. I think about a lot is those all the resources out there is just how do you get that person to the resources, and I don't have it as being a push anymore because it didn't work for me. Mm-hmm. Somehow I was pulled to it.
Sure.
And it was men having honest conversation with me and I don't think that was pulled. I was gravitated toward you.
Yeah, but that's just it. Sometimes you can't afford to wait for somebody to have their epiphany.
Yeah.
Sometimes you got to actually get them to help.
Yeah. Oh, of course. I think I always look back and, like how many times, like somebody had said to me, like, especially my wife, like I needed help. Right. And I just took that as, I can't tell how many times I started a fight. Right. Or just some kind of like discussion that didn't need to be like, but there were so many people out there, that were the whales were out there. They're telling me that, they were bumping up against me and saying, you need a problem. I just fought it. And that's why I tell people out there is just listen to other people. Don't take it as a bad way. Don't take it as a flaw, but people see you, right? They see when we're struggling. Right. I just recently asked my wife, I'm doing my VA claim and I asked her to, write the letter for PTS, about that. They said to write the letter and she right away was like, I know exactly when you changed. Right. And there was a lot of sadness in that because I was like, holy crap, like I probably, if she tells me, I probably know when exactly was too, right? But I didn't want to accept that, if I had only accepted that then and understood that, they were only trying to help me. And I think that's, if I'm the person out there that's listening and I'm struggling and people are trying to tell you, don't take it the wrong way. They're only doing it because they care. There's so many people that cared about me that I didn't listen to them. Unfortunately, I was able not to make a bad decision.
Well, that's the thing. Can we get to folk before they make that final decision that they can't come back from?
Exactly.
That's the challenge.
I wish we could every time, but unfortunately we can't. Anything else you want to chat about?
No, we can.
You sure? It's your episode. What?
No. I got it. It's all good.
So when do you plan on getting back on the mat?
Oh, we're in the short final because I'm finishing up this week with these next couple of weeks with school, and then it's game on, and then once I'm back into it, I'm into it. So
looking forward to it.
Yeah, because I'm also training up for the Army 10 miler.
Okay.
In October.
Have you ran that one before?
Yeah, in 2023. That's why I got to do it again
That's
now
because
I did not train for it in 2023. I got to redeem myself.
Those are the best races that you don't train for. That's always when you find out. My fastest times, my fastest run ever was the Houston Marathon that I did not train for.
That was not the case for my
No,
Army 10 miler in
The Army 10
2023.
mile is a great race. That's
It
a
is.
great one. So it's
And
the
it's
Marine Corps
beautiful.
Marathon.
It's beautiful.
Yeah, if you're a runner, you're not a runner, you like history, Army 10 mile is great. Marine Corps Marathon's great too. You get to run down there as well. So, but so what's your time you're shooting for? 10 miler?
Oh, I hadn't locked that in just yet. What's that?
You going 6 minute mile or what?
Oh no, it won't be that. Oh, it won't be that. We'll go like maybe 8:30. Nice and easy.
I like that.
Nice and easy.
You think you could throw down a 6 minute mile still?
No.
One? Not even one?
Oh, I could do one, right? You can do the Toby Keith,
the
right?
Toby
I'm never
Keith,
as
yeah,
good as I
exactly.
once was,
Yeah,
but I could be good once.
I feel like my body's always like that. I can do something like it's just 2 or 3 days later, you're like, oh Christ.
Right.
That wasn't
You'll
a
pay
great
for
idea.
it. You'll pay for it.
Yeah, you're out there doing I find when I'm doing work, like manual labor, like yard work or something, you're like, come on. My boy's like, come on, you can do this. And then like the next day I'm like, I can't move. But I wish you luck on that.
Why, thank you kindly.
I wish you luck on that.
And
So
if you find yourself up visiting relatives in Massachusetts, come up towards Boston. There's some some Irish pubs I can bring you to. And
so we got to ask you, are you gonna play something for us real quick? You got to play something.
all right, I can.
Hand
we'll
him
see.
what is it?
The Irish bouzouki?
The bouzouki.
All right. I'll just go.
He'll be the second person to play. The first person to play the bouzouki.
All right.
I just want to say bouzouki. I don't know why.
We'll see how it sounds, though. We didn't do any sound check with this thing.
Oh, that's all right.
That'll be the. So that's called Shebeg Shimor, which means big fairy mound, little fairy mound. So this is the bouzouki.
The bouzouki.
Yeah.
I've heard the bouzouki, but I've never seen the bouzouki. I've never paid attention to the bouzouki before.
We can sing as well and do all the good drinking songs. Oh, what do you think I've been doing all day? Boozing, bloody well boozing. And how do you think I've been spending me pay? Boozing, bloody well boozing. Don't say I'm not wrong when you know I'm not right. Don't argue the toss for you know I can fight. Where do you want me to take you tonight? Out boozing, bloody well boozing.
All right.
Yeah, there you go.
That's our first bouzouki. I don't know if we'll ever have another bouzouki player on, but it was.
You just never know.
That's never. Our second musical instrument. Well played. Well played. I love it. That is a great instrument. Nice sound.
Why, thank you.
Well done. Well done.
I'll throw these back on.
Yeah, we'll throw this back on. So we'll. You sure we nothing else to chat about?
Well, there's always things to chat about, right? I mean, we could just like
We could talk forever.
Yeah. I think I mentioned to you before. So again, I was an AIT battalion commander. I was a garrison commander. For the rest of my life, I will never be at a loss for a story. Ever.
That's a good thing to have. Stories are good. So we'll end it here for we'll bring it to a close here. Episode 76. We'll go to my least favorite part of every podcast is tonight we're going to honor a service member who took their life. Tonight we honor U.S. Marine Corps Corporal Jordan Douglas Sullivan, 40 years old. Jordan took his life on August 26, 2024 in Walton, Kentucky. Jordan was born on February 12, 1984 in Caldwell County, West Virginia. After graduating from high school in 2002, Jordan enlisted as a rifleman in the United States Marine Corps. After completing Marine Corps recruit training and School of Infantry training, Jordan was assigned to the 1st Battalion, 7th Marines in 29 Palms, California. Jordan served 3 tours of duty in support of Operation Iraqi Freedom between 2003 and 2005. After leaving the Marine Corps, Jordan trained and taught mixed martial arts and found this work very rewarding. He trained with multiple world jiu-jitsu champions and competed in numerous Brazilian jiu-jitsu tournaments. Jordan achieved his third degree jiu-jitsu black belt in 2022. Jordan was a successful owner-operator of the Triple Crown MMA in Florence, Kentucky. He was much more than a Marine and Brazilian jiu-jitsu artist and instructor. Jordan loved hiking, camping, mountain climbing, hunting, and fishing. Time spent interacting with nature was a place where Jordan found his connection to the divine. Jordan is survived by his mother, Regina, daughters Annabelle and Elise, sister Sarah, nieces Malaya and Adelie, and numerous other relatives and friends. And please, if you or someone you know is in crisis, please consider contacting the Veterans Crisis Hotline at 988, or you can dial 1-800-273-8255 and press 1, or you can text 838-255 or chat online at veteranscrisisline.net/chat. So this, before I close it, I always get in trouble with this part because I always forget the quote. I always forget a lot of good quotes. Josh will have to remind me this time. So this is from Ricardo Almeida. Am I saying that right? Jiu-jitsu person? Almeida, sound right?
Yeah.
So jiu-jitsu and martial arts do not build character, they reveal it. We are all born with an immeasurable courage and determination, but it is as we go through the trials of rigorous training that we discover those gifts. So again, I'd like to thank you for coming all the way from Massachusetts. You're our furthest traveling guest so far. I'd like to thank my old rook, Sean, for putting this together and bringing him, picking him up and coming. We'll have to have you on here soon when you can make your way out here, and your son needs some more chicken from the Columbus area. But again, I want to thank you for coming on, sharing your story, especially sharing the loss of your wife. I know that you didn't have to do that, and I really appreciate that. And I'd like to thank you and for your 36 long years of service to our nation, and I wish you the best moving forward. Just a couple other announcements before we go. Our friends at Stock Hands are having an event that's coming up. If you're a bourbon lover, which a lot of us are, this is going to be a great event. Last year they had Horse Soldier. This year they have, I think, Green River Distillery as well as Bardstown Bourbon Company. Huge event. Tickets are online. A great experience. Whether you do the VIP tactical package or the tasting dinner experience, there are tickets open. It's a great event for a great cause. So we made a post in the page. Please, if you can't attend it, please share it. It's like I said, it's a great event. And any type of money they make, we've had them on before. It goes for a really, really great cause here in Central Ohio. So last part is our upcoming guests. You started the trend. We don't know who we're going to have in a couple weeks, which is fine. I think we got a couple people that finalized, but we got a couple people coming from Louisville, which is, not too far away. You beat them still. You're still ahead. So looking forward to that. And like I said, if anybody's listening, you'd like to come on and be a guest, you could take it from everybody who's been here. We feed you well. We won't have the bouzouki player though. Maybe you can come back and play for him. But
ambiance.
Yeah, but please come. We'd love to share your story. And just contact us if you're interested. So again, I'd like to thank you for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
Good seeing you again, Sean. We'll be able to chat more. Thanks for bringing them in here, and we'll see everybody here in a couple weeks. Have a great night, everyone.